friends, welcome to the Habitus. Follow us at habituspod on Twitter. My name's Michael Pattison. I'm here with my co-host Bobby Lowe, and somehow we've reached already the 9th episode of this podcast. It's out of sync with our usual fortnightly output because we're going to be using the opportunity to wrap up 2017. I have no idea what you think of the year, Bobby, in terms of movie going, but I'm going to find out soon enough. We're going to cover everything on this episode, just everything, the whole year. Honourable mentions, firstly, most anticipated of the year in terms of how they matched up. Then we'll probably get down to something resembling a top 10 favourites list of commercially released films. And then I want to know, and I want to share my own, I want to know what were the best new films that you watched this year? New to you, I mean, not new films, but like new to you. So prepare yourself, please, for that. And then finally, probably looking forward to the coming year, 2018, and what you're anticipating and most excited about. Firstly, though, I get the impression, being obviously in touch with you between recording episodes for this, I get the impression that you see more movies than me in terms of commercial releases. How many have you seen this year? Do you know? Do you have the tally to hand?
Not right here. No, I have.
I've seen 41. Now I saw those in various capacities as a journalist, as an accredited journalist at film festivals. So many of the films that were released this year I saw last year, if not in 2015, actually, in the case of at least one movie that was released belatedly this year. And I also pay to see movies when I haven't had the opportunity to see them as a accredited press. And yeah, I've also crammed a lot of catch-up viewings in recently just for the purpose of, seeing the kinds of films that everyone else is saying that are good that I had somehow missed.
94.
You've watched 94 films that have been theatrically released or commercially released in the UK and Ireland this year.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. 41 for me. I guess you like movies more than I do.
I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So how many did you like? It's a weird question to ask, but how many did you plan to see? Was there any movies this year that you planned to watch or that you were excited about that somehow you didn't get to see?
Yeah, loads. I mean, if I watched everything that I planned to watch or everything that I kind of I'm aware of and have on my radar, I wouldn't watch anything but brand new films, which I don't want to do either.
No, I made a concerted effort last year to watch less new films, which can be a very difficult policy to adopt when your primary income is through film festivals, because you're forced and pressured into covering, new films, which can be frustrating. And so I made a conscious effort to kind of watch less, and I ended up enjoying 2016 a lot more. And then this year, for some reason, I tried, for good reason, I think, I tried to refined or find a balance between new stuff and older stuff, and I think I'm happy with my viewing this year. I mean, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of movies, but as I said, only 41 of them. Unless I'm missing a few, I really don't think I am. I don't keep tallies to the same degree as you do anymore. I mean, I keep a viewing log of everything I watch, but I don't delineate new releases, and I mean, there's obviously a way to find out, but I don't keep a running list of. But of
the year's movies as you go. Yeah, okay.
And it's something that I'll probably do in 2018. I'll probably start doing that again.
Okay. But for you, watching new releases, as you say, it is it's tied to your income.
Yeah.
And you have to frame it in a particular way, whereas I don't. So
yeah. You can go to the movies and forget about them.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me some films that you didn't see.
Right, I have a long list here of films that my list of shame.
I mean, don't say one of them. We'll be here for hours. But...
I'll just run through them real quick.
Okay.
Sweet, Sweet Lonely Girl, Creep 2, The Red Turtle, We Are the Flesh, Wheelman, Beyond the Gates, The Leveling, Dark Knight, Ethel and Ernest, The Wall, Cult of Chucky, I Am Not a Witch, Una, Wish Upon, The Lure, Bushwick, American Fable, Detour, The Transfiguration, A Dark Song, 1922, The Book of Henry, Eisenstein and Guanajuato, Personal Shopper, Happy End, Resident Evil The Final Chapter, A Monster Calls, Annabelle Creation, Atomic Blonde, Jungle, Thelma, Stronger, Logan Lucky, Okja, The Love Witch, Loving, Mountains May Depart, Endless Poetry, Live by Night, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, Brimstone, The Wailing, and Tony Erdmann. Were all on my list and I didn't see any of them.
Wow, you should be ashamed of yourself. Okay,
I'm deeply ashamed.
I've seen 42 movies this year, not 41, because one of those that you mentioned I didn't have on my list as a release. It's Eisenstein in Guanajuato.
Right. Well, that was on my list due to a technicality that it never played in Dublin cinemas, so it was actually the DVD release in February that got that onto the list.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll cross it back out from my list. So I did watch 41. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you had an uneventful year of not watching movies. And okay, so like, we're going to come to. In fact, yeah, let's go. Let's start with. I said at the top of the show that we'll do honourable mentions, but I think it makes kind of more sense to do most anticipated of the year in terms of what you did see
from last year. So it's 2016's most anticipated of 2017. Yeah, okay.
What were you looking forward to? What you did see?
Okay.
Because I know you keep such lists. I don't.
Right. Yeah, I've always kind of kept on top of upcoming films. And then, neglected to see them when they actually come out. So in December of 2016, my top 10 most anticipated films of 2017 were, and most of these had release dates when, most of these had confirmed release dates at the time. Right. A couple of them didn't, and actually 2 of the 10 still haven't been released, so they'll actually be 2018 releases. Okay. Those 2 are Alex Garland's Annihilation and Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here. Right. Which were both in post-production at the end of 2016, and I figured they would come out in 2017, but they didn't, so. The other 8 were, just in alphabetical order, they were Alien Covenant, Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, L, Free Fire, The Lost City of Zed, Split, and Star Wars Episode 8, which didn't have a title at the time, so The Last Jedi. Right. Yeah.
Which we covered.
How many of them do you think... Episode. Yeah, which we covered last week. How many of them do you think made it onto my top 10 of the year?
Ooh, well, I happen to know that you weren't that big a fan of Alien Covenant.
No.
Like 1, maybe 2.
One film.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't guess which one it is yet, but I have a good idea. My most anticipated. I mean, I don't make such lists, so I'm just looking at like my final top 10 here, which we'll get to, and I'm trying to figure out how many of them I was even like aware of, and I think like 1 or 2. So like obviously in January we had released like La La Land, which at that point I was looking forward to watching just because of the buzz around it, so I was aware that was coming out. Like Manchester by the Sea, I hadn't seen. Moonlight was another one. So all the upcoming Oscar contenders, and then of course like Silence, the Scorsese film. So and January tends to be quite a busy month for me in terms of like cinema going. Yeah.
We got all the Oscar movies in January, February. Yeah. So January's reputation for being kind of like a cinematic wasteland doesn't really apply here.
Yeah.
But I don't even necessarily think that it applies in America either. I think it's like that comes just from critics circles because they see all the movies in November and December over there.
Yeah.
But I think for general audiences, most stuff goes into wide release in January over there as well. So, but in terms of like studio programmers and things like that come out in January, they're usually the dregs.
Yeah, because of course by that point, like those movies that are released have been, they premiered at like, let's say, if not Cannes, then Venice as recently as like September of that year. So they've had like a good few months to generate and acquire some sort of critical traction and buzz.
Or be unfairly forgotten about.
Yeah. Has there been any films this year that you think have been like unfairly forgotten about? That have like come and gone? I mean,
forgotten about in the sense of having received acclaim initially and then fizzled out?
I mean, like, not necessarily in terms of, like, it didn't get, like, a massive push. I think it fizzled very quickly, but, like, I was thinking more of, like, Aronofsky's Mother, which was obviously spoken about in our Aronofsky episode. And, like, even Dunkirk, like, Nolan's Dunkirk seemed to come and then just, like, go. And I don't know if that's because it was, like...
Yeah, I don't know, it just got nominated. Didn't it just get nominated for Best Picture, though, at the Golden Globes?
Yeah, but who cares about the Golden
Globes? It's probably gonna... Yeah, but it's probably gonna be an Oscar Best Picture nom as well.
Fair enough, yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's a weird point of the year. No, it's a sensible point of our year to, you know, in terms of the calendar wrap. But, like, we don't know what is going with regard to the Oscars. But I just, like, yeah, I felt like Dunkirk sort of, like, disappeared, fizzled out. No,
I'm looking here, I don't really see anything that was critically acclaimed and then sort of disappeared.
What about, like, movies that you feel didn't get enough in the first place? I mean, obviously we'll
so many.
Yeah, I mean, don't mention any that are going to be part of your final top 10.
Okay, all right. So these are films that nobody seemed to really pay much attention to that I thought were good.
I bet you they're just a list of weird horror films, are they?
Well, that's the thing, yeah. You know, okay. I'll tell you, there was a really, really well-made Australian horror thriller called Hounds of Love.
Hounds of Love, okay.
By I believe it's a debut film by Ben Young.
Okay.
Who's now directing like a big budget science fiction film.
Of course he is.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. But it's kind of loosely based on a true story from the 80s, and it's about a couple who are kind of in a dysfunctional relationship, and the woman is being kind of manipulated and pressured by the man into accompanying him on this like spree of kidnap, rape, and murder.
Okay.
And they kidnap a woman, a young woman, and you know they do their thing with her, and then she realizes that there's a possibility that she could drive a wedge between them.
Okay.
You know, so it's really well made, really well produced.
Okay.
What else? I mean, there are a couple of like Netflix films, things like Gerald's Game and The Babysitter, that I thought were really good. Do you know what was hugely underrated? And actually, we mentioned it on the last episode as well when we were talking about Die Hard 2. Is Daniel Espinosa's Life, the alleged alien
Which I didn't
clone.
see, because this was for you unfairly dismissed on the grounds that it was a replica of Alien, right? Yeah.
That it was a clone. Yeah. Like, despite the fact that there are no scenes, no real like aspects of character or imagery or even concept in any kind of substantial way that are directly lifted from Alien. Really solid, entertaining, satisfying sci-fi horror.
But sorry, that wasn't one of the Netflix ones, right?
No. That was a theatrical release. Yeah. Actually, another one was The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Right.
With Brian Cox and Emil Hirsch, which is about a woman whose like body is there's a murder in a house and the police are investigating and they find this woman's body half buried in the basement and she's taken to the morgue and it was like a quadruple homicide or something like that. So the mayor wants like answers immediately. So the mortician and his son, who's his apprentice, are brought in and they have to kind of work through the night to identify this woman. And as they start investigating her body, they start discovering that there are things that just don't make sense. Like her lungs look like that indicate that she died in a fire, but no, there are no other marks on her body, and there are these things inside of her body, and there's no way that they could have gotten there. All this kind of weird stuff going on, and it
sounds like an
escalates.
X-Files episode.
It is, but the first half of the film is like the autopsy,
right? And
all of this getting stranger and stranger and stranger, and like you don't know what's going on, and it unfortunately kind of leans a little bit into more sort of like, you know, familiar kind of jump scare stuff in the second half, but it has a satisfying ending. So yeah, that was directed by, I forget his name. He directed Troll Hunter.
Oh, the Norwegian guy, Andre Uvredal, I believe.
Yeah.
Apologies, Andre, if I've mispronounced that. I'm sure you're listening.
Yeah. What about you though? What about films that you saw that?
What I saw, I mean, like, I didn't really feel like it was a great year, and those kinds of, you know, sentiments, end of year sentiments, like, oh, it wasn't a great year for cinema. I always find like them just a little bit cliched, whatever. Like, but And yet, here I am going to say it. I didn't really feel like it was a good year. Like, once I strip my list of the 2017 world premieres that haven't been released yet, I don't feel like it was all that great. I certainly wasn't like... I feel like the great films or the very good films were few and far between. And the reason I'm like kind of qualifying my answer to your question is because there's very few films that I think, oh my God, that went under the radar, you should see that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a few, and I'll mention, at least two in my honourable mentions list that I think were worth seeing, definitely. But, no, I mean, there's very few films that I would feel like they went under the radar. Like, there's a few, like, low-key documentaries that I feel like didn't really get that wide enough exposure. But then I used the term wide enough, like, reluctantly, because I feel like they got the audience that their productions sort of, invited or encouraged. Like, I'm talking about, like, Almost Heaven, Carol Salter's documentary, which was on Mubi, was on video on demand here. And I think it was released in cinemas as well. I mean, released in cinemas, it could just be like a selected key sites in London job, for like one weekend. And it's like, it's not going to get anywhere near where I live. Okay, well, let's move on to like, let's move on to like official honourable mentions.
Yeah, the
films that are sort of
okay, let's do it.
Hovering around your top 10, but not quite there. I'm gonna mention one, right? Just to begin with.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I feel like I should mention it only because it's the first and to date the only film that we saw together, and it's The Fate of the Furious, which was, until I started to watch all of the other films to catch up on the year's viewing, it was in my top 10 at one point. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good action film, extremely funny entry into the series. Jason Statham is wonderful in it. Yeah.
I mean, his sequence. Sorry, we did the same thing on our most recent episode when we talked about Star Wars, and we warned everybody that it was a spoiler-heavy episode. We're going to try to not have any spoilers on this episode because we're not forewarning people.
Yeah.
About the films that we're going to be discussing, and I actually listened to a Best of 2016 podcast at the end of last year, and they were just like dropping surprise spoilers for films that I was kind of interested in seeing.
Did you write in and complain about them? Did you leave a comment on the
I shut it off very quickly when they started getting too detailed.
But
we're going to try to avoid it.
Okay, so sorry, is it a spoiler that Jason Statham's in The Fate of the Furious? I forget.
No.
Okay. Sorry. I thought it said something disastrously. Right. Okay.
No. That just reminded me.
Okay.
That we need to just tread carefully on some of these because they are new films and it's not fair.
It's true. It's true.
But I agree. I thought that film. I think it's still a bit underrated.
Yeah.
It's not really. Yeah. It got kind of like fairly tepid reviews, and it was considered kind of like a step down from the previous films. I preferred it to Furious 7. I think like Jason Statham has a particular set piece in the middle of the film that is
extremely
both
funny.
Both the funniest and some of the best choreographed action in the entire series.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think anyone who's seen the film knows the scene that we're talking about.
Well, I said on Twitter when Star Wars came out a few weeks ago, number of like properly good, not just like might be good, properly good Star Wars films out of what is now 8 or 9 if you include the Rogue One film.
Rogue One, yeah.
And I would say like 1 or 2, right? 3 are
properly good.
3 are like a real push. Yeah. And a number of...
I'd say 4. I'd include The Force Awakens now. The original trilogy and
wow. No,
I've never been a Return of the Jedi hater.
It's fine, but it's, whatever.
I think Return of the Jedi has some of the best material, and it has the best space battle in the original trilogy. It has the throne room scene. People get a little hung up on the Ewoks.
Anyway, if I may continue.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I think the number of properly good Fast and Furious films we've had out of 8 is like 4 or 5.
5?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You don't think we've had that many?
Properly good.
I think like from 5.
Well, I don't think any of the Fast and Furious movies are as good as the original Star Wars trilogy.
Okay.
No,
I don't know. Anyway,
I'd say 1, 5, 6, and 8 are good films.
I like 7. 7's
Seven's
emotional. 7's emotional. Yeah.
When Paul Walker breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah. So give me one of your honourable mentions.
I'm going to throw in A Ghost Story by David Lowery.
Okay.
Which kind of surprised me. I didn't watch any trailers for it, but my understanding of it was, Casey Affleck's character dies and then returns as a ghost and kind of watches Rooney Mara's character move on with her life. And that is like the first half of the film. And then it goes off in a completely different, much weirder, much like more like wildly ambitious, like conceptually ambitious direction. And its reach way exceeds its grasp. Like it starts going for like really like grappling with like issues of like deep time and like the end of the world and like all this kind of stuff that's just really interesting and ambitious, and some of it is fumbled a bit. And there's one scene that I've seen a lot of people complaining about in the middle of the film featuring Will Oldham.
I heard about
going
this.
on and on and on about the themes of the film, which is just a terrible scene. But if you ignore that scene, the rest of the film is pretty interesting and pretty ambitious.
Right, okay.
And very, very unique.
It was on my radar. I kind of semi-actively avoided it on the, after hearing feedback from several of my many trusted sources, which agreed that it wasn't a very good film.
Okay. I would say it is a good film.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One film I want to mention that it feels like I watched this about 5 years ago, but it's Certain Women by Kelly Reichardt.
Right, yeah, that was going to be one of my honourable mentions.
And it's weird because films like this that are divided into distinct parts, films of that kind rarely make it to like best of lists, I feel like. General ones.
You mean anthology
Yeah,
films? Yeah, okay.
But this is an anthology film where all three segments are directed by the same filmmaker. And so inevitably it feels, even if it isn't, it feels kind of uneven and slight in comparison to her other features.
Yeah, I would agree with uneven, but I wouldn't agree with slight.
Yeah.
I think the first segment with Laura Dern kind of feels like overly familiar. It feels like a scenario that I've seen play out before in other films. The guy at the end of his tether takes a hostage and asks for the one person in his life that he trusts to come in. It was a pretty familiar scenario, and it was well done, but it wasn't. I didn't think it was anything special. The second segment with Michelle Williams is really weird.
I can't remember it.
Like seemingly allegorical. It's the one about she's building a house.
Oh yeah,
and she's asking for the stockpile of sandstone that this old man has in his yard. She has a special meaning for her, and she wants to use it in the construction of her house. And the whole segment has this like these overtones of kind of ambiguous allegory, but it feels dramatically kind of empty. There's something going on. Like we do see the character played by James LaGrosse in the first segment, and there's a little bit of a connection there, and you can see that they're having marital troubles or whatever, but it's very underwritten. Kind of intriguing, but not. It's the weakest of the three. And then the third segment is the best thing that Kelly Reichardt's ever done.
Oh, really? Even more so than Wendy and Lucy, because I know you were a big fan of that.
Yeah. I think this third segment with Kristen Stewart and Lily Gladstone is just like so achingly sad and tender.
It is, and I'm a big fan
understated.
I'm a big fan of unrequited love as a premise for stories and thematic expansions and whatever else. And it plays it so you've got the Reichardian touch to it as well, so it's very restrained, and there's a brutality there and cruelty, but it's never really forced. Yeah, I liked it a lot as well. Yeah, I agree. It's much better than the other two. And it's the only one I feel that I could see being expanded into something longer.
I wouldn't expand it though. I think it's perfect length.
I wouldn't, but I could see it being. I feel like the other two are like they feel like adaptations of very short, thin stories, whereas I feel like that could possibly have been.
I mean, if I was going to expand any of them, I would expand the second segment.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, any other
underrated
or overlooked?
I want to mention
or honourable mentions.
Wind River by Taylor Sheridan, in which Elizabeth Olsen plays an out-of-town FBI agent who comes to an Indian reservation in Wyoming to investigate the death of an 18-year-old Native American woman. And there's weird... it's a very, very gentle film, or a gentle delivery of a brutal tale.
Yeah.
And I feel like it didn't quite reach my top 10 because I felt like even its subtleties and ambiguities, they felt written, rather than the outcome of proper directorial restraint, if you know what I mean. They felt like overly cooked or engineered, if you like. But I think it's beautifully acted. I think Jeremy Renner is wonderful in it. I'm not convinced that Elizabeth Olsen, and I was speaking to a pal who mentioned it also, I'm not convinced that her character has any real narrative function. I don't really know why she's in it, which seems to be a strange thing to say since she's the sort of driving mechanism. She seems to exist.
I mean, she is an outsider, sort of a surrogate, the kind of, that character function in a story like this very culturally specific story, like a surrogate tour guide kind of character for us, to whom things need to be explained and things like that.
But it's a beautiful evocation of space and place, and it reminded me a lot of Vera Brunner Sung's Bella Vista, which is also shot in Wyoming from a few years back. And I think it has one of the best sequences of the year, which is not to go too much into detail, but it's a very tense standoff.
A Mexican standoff.
Between two sets of people, and the tension comes from what's at stake at that point in the story, but also the jurisdiction of who has jurisdiction on this land, this reservation land. And at that point, Elizabeth Olsen's character is she known as a federal agent? Because I think she intervenes finally, but she doesn't want to. And it's very, very
a clash of authority and jurisdiction and ego and all of these things.
Yeah, it's really, really cool scene. It's really, really well done.
Actually, another film that had a similar standout sequence like that is Peter Berg's Patriots Day with Mark Wahlberg.
Okay,
which I thought was very underrated and overlooked as well. It was kind of the Peter Berg he's made 3 films in a row that are based on real events with Mark Wahlberg. He made Lone Survivor and he made Deepwater Horizon last year, the one about the oil rig fire, which were both good. And then this one seemed to be a little bit overlooked. Maybe the events were too recent, the Boston bombing, I don't know. But there is a shootout in this movie that is one of the all-time great shootouts.
Oh wow, okay.
It's I think it's a very good film in general, but the shootout, some of the action in it is incredible.
Do you think there's a cultural suspicion at the moment about films that are rushed out in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy? Dramatization of awful things. I think it tends to be met with a certain hostility, righteous or otherwise. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know, because the David Gordon Green film Stronger, which actually I forgot to list on my list of shame, is also about the Boston bombing, or about a victim of the Boston bombing and his efforts to overcome his injuries. That's kind of also been a little bit overlooked. So yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know. I wanted to mention The Death of Stalin actually as well.
Oh, I missed The Death of Stalin,
which is I was really surprised me. Thought the trailer looked okay, but the film is far better than the trailer indicates. Really funny, but with this incredibly dark undercurrent, this undercurrent of existential horror and arbitrary violence, and all of these people scrambling for power, not because they necessarily want power, but because if they're not the ones with the power when all the dust settles, then they end up dead.
Yeah.
And all of these people just living on this knife edge of paranoia and mistrust.
Did you watch the thick of it? Were you a fan of it?
I watched the first 3 seasons, I think,
Okay.
and I thought it was funny, but a little bit too, I think, a little bit too dependent on a familiarity with like British parliamentary politics. That it was satirizing. And,
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful, brilliant, effectively depressing evocation of that milieu, London milieu.
Right.
And the reason I ask is not only because Iannucci wrote Death of Stalin, but because the premise, as you've just described it, sounds a bit like the spin-offs, the hour-long spin-offs that he wrote as part of the thick of it, which I think took place between season 3 and season 4, which was set in the immediate aftermath of. I mean, it's satirizing the Gordon Brown's succession of Tony Blair, and who is going to, the rise of the nut, as it's called, who is going to, survive the cut here. And it's not that they want power; it's just that they don't. It's more dangerous not to have power than it is to have it. Yeah, it's a film that I missed, and I missed on the strength of. I missed because of how bad the trailer was. I thought, wow, that just doesn't look like my thing at all. And by the sounds of it, it was the most mismarketed film of the year.
I might give that to Mother.
Oh yeah, Mother. Yeah, which we talked about already on the show. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. Into any other honourable mentions?
No, none from me.
Just very quickly. No. All right. I'll just very quickly rattle off a few here. Get Out.
Okay.
Which I believe we're going to be talking about later.
We'll be talking about later.
Yeah. Okay. Also wanted to mention Jackie.
Okay.
Which I think was quite divisive.
Yeah.
Really worked for me. Really liked it. Love that kind of like kaleidoscopic depiction of history.
It reminded me when I was watching it of another film that I know that you surprisingly for me liked, was Stephen Frears' The Queen.
Oh yeah,
you like that?
Sure.
Way back when.
Yeah, I mean, stylistically they have very little in common though.
Yeah.
The Queen is a very kind of like straightforward, talky kind of drama, whereas this is much more like it's much more cut up. It's much more kind of like swirling.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't convinced by its framing device. With Billy Crudup as the journalist.
The interview, yeah.
It seemed a bit redundant to me. They seemed to set it up almost. It was as if they'd set that up to help them through the process of writing the skeleton of the plot, with the intention of then stripping that away at some point, but then they just left it in, and it just felt like still there, and they didn't really know what to do with it.
Right. No, I mean, I agree that if the film has a weaker side, it's that, but that stuff still I find quite interesting. Also going to throw an honourable mention at Nocturama.
Okay, which we'll be discussing again later on.
We have already discussed on our second episode.
Briefly.
Pretty briefly. We kind of got sidetracked. Yeah. Let's see what else. The Dardenne Brothers, The Unknown Girl, which I think for you would be a 2016 release.
It would.
Just didn't play in Dublin cinemas. It was released in December of 2016 in the UK, but it didn't play in Dublin cinemas, so it's a 2017 release for me. Weirdly, tepidly received.
Right. Yeah.
I felt it's not their best film, but like it's still a very strong
film. Have the Dardennes fallen victim to the unfair or otherwise critique that they've started making films too much like the Dardenne Brothers?
Which is another way of saying that people have just gotten tired of them.
Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I understand. Like, this is one of their weaker films, but, I mean, I think 2 Days, One Night got a similarly kind of tepid response, not quite to the same degree, maybe, but it was still sort of, okay, another Dardenne Brothers film.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought 2 Days, One Night was the second best film of 2014.
Okay.
I thought it was incredible. So yeah, I don't know.
I'll mention Logan Lucky. Did you see that? Steven Soderbergh.
No,
I liked it.
That was on my list of shame at the beginning.
I'm a Soderbergh fan, I guess. I appreciate the films he makes. Huge fan of Shea Parts 1 and 2. He's very capable of, telling a story. I think if this film has a dud point, it's the one for which it was praised, and that's the casting of Daniel Craig, which I didn't find all that funny. He's meant to be this comically, aggressive ex-con, and it didn't really work for me. But I really liked Channing Tatum in it, and it has a rhythm and punchiness, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. Do you know what else was actually really good? Garth Davis's Lion, which was one of the Best Picture nominees this year. One of the less celebrated of them, I think, really. One of the ones that got less...
really didn't expect you to say that film as an honourable mention. I
thought the first act of the film is absolutely amazing. It's like... It's when he's a kid, lost in Calcutta in the 80s, and it's like an apocalyptic film. Like, it's all these, like, homeless children and these people who are, like, predators who are trying to abduct them, and they have to, like, keep away from them. And, like, Calcutta is depicted in this, like dense smog and everything. It's like Mega City 1 and Judge Dredd or something. It's horrible. Okay. And then when he's grown up and the rest of it's very moving, but more conventional drama in the second half. But the first act of the film is just incredible. That's about it, really, for me for honourable mentions.
Okay. What's been your most pleasant surprise this year? If not a film in your top 10.
If it is a film in my top 10.
If it is a film in your top 10, yeah, mention it anyway. Yeah, go on then. I'll allow you.
I'll reveal my number 10 spot then.
Okay.
Here. So my number 10 film of the year is Logan.
Not Lucky Logan. This is just plain old Logan.
Not Logan Lucky, just Logan.
Right.
There was also a film that came out this year called Lucky with
the John Carroll Lynch film, with Harry Dean Stanton. Yeah.
Harry Dean Stanton, yeah.
That would be a good triple bill.
Lucky, Logan, and Logan Lucky.
Yeah.
So Logan. So I didn't expect much from this film at all. For a couple of reasons. One, Hugh Jackman has been playing this role for 18 years, and it's well past time that he hung it up. It gave somebody else a chance to interpret the character.
Logan doesn't age though, does he?
No, but I just mean, like, he's like squatting over this one character. Yeah. Like, there's only ever going to be one cinematic depiction at a time. So, do 3 films and then give it up and let somebody else interpret it and give us a new interpretation of the character. But not that to say that he isn't good in the role, he is, but, like, it's just too long for one actor to play one character exclusively.
Yeah.
An iconic character that begs for reinterpretation, like somebody like Wolverine. But also, I didn't like either of the preceding solo Wolverine outings. And one of those was also directed by James Mangold, who directed this. Yeah. And I actually liked that one even less than the previous one, which everybody hated, but I thought kind of had a slightly sort of trashy appeal. The second one, the Wolverine, the one set in Japan, was just really, really tedious. But this is really good. It's really funny. It's really idiosyncratic. It's a personal film. It feels like it was made by like a real filmmaker with real ideas, who was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. Doesn't feel like it was produced by a studio algorithm. And the rapport between Hugh Jackman and it's also Patrick Stewart's best performance as Professor X. The rapport between Jackman and Stewart is great. The kid who plays X-23, the young mutant, Daphne Keane, is fantastic. The film is so good. Really, really surprisingly good.
Is it a sequel?
Not really. It's pretty standalone. There are some
so I don't need to have seen.
You definitely do not need to subject yourself to the other 12 films in the series or anything like that. Not at all.
Okay.
You don't need to see. I mean, there are little Easter egg connections. Like, do you remember? You saw the first X-Men film, didn't you?
Yeah, but I can't remember that.
Yeah, well, it ends with a big battle on the Statue of Liberty, and there's like some reference in the middle of the film to what happened with the Statue of Liberty or something like that. And they say like, oh, that was like 35 years ago or whatever, because it's set in the future. And some reference to Jean Grey, like Logan's lost love, that kind of stuff. Easter egg references for people who have seen the films, but it's very much a standalone story.
Right.
It would help to have seen it would help to have seen Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman in at least one or two previous X-Men films to understand their relationship goes back a long time and everything that. But beyond that, no. Beyond that, it's a standalone movie that I would highly recommend.
Well, my final...
And and one more thing. Really, like when they said that this was R-rated, I expected that it would be kind of like, like Deadpool, where it would be like there'd be blood and guts, there'd be some swearing, there'd be some like bawdy humor. Yeah. But I didn't expect it to go like really adult, like go really, really to really dark places. But it does. Like there's some of the stuff in it. And again, this is no spoilers, so I can't be too specific. But there is some stuff that like you don't even see in relation to children that you don't even see in horror films. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. So my most pleasant surprise would be my 11th placed film of the year. So I suppose this is the final before we go into proper top 10 territory for me.
Okay.
Final special mention would be to La La Land. Damien Chazelle's musical and follow-up to Whiplash. And this was the most pleasant surprise of the year for me, largely because I really didn't like Damien Chazelle's Whiplash. I thought it was, one of the most overrated films of that year. And then a film in which Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling are playing like, a couple in a musical set in Los Angeles, which has Oscar buzz, which is likely to win the Oscar, although, obviously it didn't. But at the point at which I saw it, I'd also just like, I think it was the emotional circumstances in which I saw it also. Like, I really wasn't expecting the film to be as emotionally complex as it is. It's not just a feel-good film. There is a bit of sweetness to its narrative, especially in its later stages.
Have you seen The Umbrellas of Cherbourg?
No.
Oh, okay. I actually watched that before seeing La La Land because I knew that it was a big source of influence for Chazelle, and throughout the film there are a lot of visual references and like, some of the, like the shop is named the same thing that the shop is named in The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, but it's the same kind of that very kind of soft, bittersweet kind of like ships passing in the night kind of theme.
Which I love.
But Cherbourg is not punctuated by, it's not a drama punctuated by musical numbers. All of the dialogue in the film is sung, but there are no songs as such.
I get you.
That kind of way.
Yeah.
I preferred Cherbourg.
My one reservation with La La Land is that when it does reach dramatic territory there, where emotionally complicated things need to be negotiated, it abandons its musicality. It abandons the music, the musical form, and I couldn't help but think of the One More Time with Feeling episode from Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a comparison, which does go into emotionally complicated territory but never abandons its musical form and does confront and negotiate all of that through the musical. But yeah, I really liked it. I really want to see it again, actually.
I enjoyed it. The only part of it that I really disliked was the protracted John Legend performance, which as it wore on, I just started to feel like I was just watching like John Legend performing. He was playing a character, wasn't he?
He was meant to be, yeah. But I think the reason why, in the end, I demoted La La Land from my top 10 is because I didn't want to have 3 films at the end of 2017 in my top 10 starring Ryan Gosling.
3?
We'll come to the other 2.
Interesting.
Anyway, moving into the official top 10 now, the serious business, although it still is only a 7 out of 10, which may or may not be a further reflection of a below average year, is Manchester by the Sea, Kenneth Lonergan's long-awaited follow-up to Margaret. I was a fan with reservations of Margaret, and I must say Manchester by the Sea took some warming to. Did you like this film also?
Yeah, I liked it.
Presumably you saw it? Yeah,
I didn't get out of it what other people seemed to. I just thought it was good. And
yeah, it's weird. I didn't think I had either. So it's about a guy played by Casey Affleck negotiating the tricky emotional terrain in the aftermath of his brother's death. But there's also further complications in the form of a failed marriage, which has been brought on by a tragedy that is delved into later on in the film. I think the performances are across the board excellent. Michelle Williams as Affleck's ex-wife is absolutely marvelous, scene-stealingly good. I know we've mentioned her already with regard to the middle segment of certain women. I mean,
right.
She's great in most things, I think. I loved her in this film. I think their on-screen chemistry had a gravity to it that I really loved, and I wanted more of, which is why it's not further up the list. But
Right.
there's a chilliness to it, there's a tragedy to it, there's a hysteria to it, which I found quite bold and risky. The way it's done, and there's also a dark streak of comedy as well, which I also found quite refreshing.
Yeah, that was unexpected. Actually, the pivotal, the scene, the Michelle Williams scene that I'm sure played when she, when they announced her nomination for Best Actress.
Yeah.
I was watching that and it wasn't doing it for me at all. And I was like,
No?
Yeah, did you like that?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And one of my favorite scene, I think, in the film is when Affleck's on the phone and he receives some news he's not expecting to receive, and he's left in the immediate aftermath of the phone call ending, and we just stay with him in the room, and he has to kind of just adjust, and the way he physically manifests that adjustment, I found very, very touching. But again, I mean, when I watched it, I came out the cinema, I saw it the same day as a rewatch at the cinema of Singing in the Rain, one of my favourite ever films. And Manchester by the Sea, I was aware of its, the buzz it was receiving. I wasn't fully on board with it. And then across the next month or so, it stayed with me to a degree that I really wasn't expecting.
Right.
Which is why I guess it snuck in, and I think that is the correct phrase to use there. It snuck into my top 10.
I also gave it a 7 out of 10, but it wouldn't be anywhere near even the lower end of my list.
Right. I mean, as I mentioned, I hadn't been keeping a running list this year of what the top 10 would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know. And so I'm a little bit surprised that I'm here recording an episode now saying that Manchester by the Sea is in my top 10, because back in January when I saw it, if you'd said to me is immediately after coming out the cinema, that's going to be in your final top 10 of the year, I would have been like, wow, okay, what a bad year we're in for. But things picked up and it has stayed with me. So, and I really want to rewatch it as well.
All right, my number 9 is a film that wasn't really on my radar at all before I saw it earlier this year in January. Is 20th Century Women, written and directed by Mike Mills, who, like, when I watched the film, I didn't pay any attention to who had written and directed it until afterwards. And when I clicked on his name on IMDb, I saw that he had directed 2005's Thumbsucker, which I remember hating.
I didn't see that either.
I remember hating that, though.
Okay, right.
I don't remember it in much detail, but I remember not liking it. This, though, I thought was great. It's a kind of... My understanding is that it's like a loosely autobiographical story. It's set in California in 1979. The main character is a teenage boy who is, represents Mike Mills at that time. And It's about his mother and one of his female friends and one of his mother's female lodgers and his relationship with those 3 women. And other people who live in the house. It's quite a big house, and she rents out some of the rooms. And it's just like a really warm, funny, poignant period drama that's kind of... It's kind of like elegantly like woven into the historical period. There's a lot of use of archive footage and stuff like that. You didn't hear anything about this movie, or?
No, I just wasn't. I mean, like, I'm aware vaguely of its existence. Although, so many women going around these days. We've got certain women, 20th century women. I didn't see Wonder Woman, but I know you did. We'll probably have Wonder Women at some point. So, when that happens, films can, for me anyway, get a little bit mixed up and fall off the radar. And so, yeah, it wasn't... I mean, it was released here in February, I think. No, I didn't. I mean, is it like an outright funny, laugh-out-loud comedy?
I suppose it's what nowadays would be called a dramedy.
Okay. Can you think of any other film of recent years that I might be able to get it, like, I might be able to compare it to, like, tonally? Like The Kids Are All Right? Would that
Yeah,
be,
that wouldn't be a million miles away, or maybe something
Okay.
like something by Alexander Payne or something like that.
Right. Got you.
Right. Yeah. It kind of crept up on me. You know, like I wasn't expecting a huge amount from it. I watched it in the run up to the Oscars. You know, it was one of the films that was in play. It wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but I think Annette Bening was nominated for Best Actress. And you know, I enjoyed it all the way through. I thought it was really funny. Like as I said, really warm and humane. And then I don't know, it stayed with me. And like a little while later, I was talking to my friend who I watched it with, and I was like, you know, I think I love that. You know, one of those kind of films, the kind of the, you know, what in broader cultural terms might be called like a sleeper hit. It's like works in a similar kind of way.
Right. Okay. It's similar to Manchester by the Sea for me, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Have you had a chance to rewatch it to confirm its position in your top 10? Or
no, I haven't.
Okay.
I wanted to for this, but
I like that though. You know, like in fact, I'm going to ask you a question now. I'm going to throw something in there. Which film have you seen this year which you would most like to revisit, if not that? And it doesn't even have to be a film that you particularly liked. It might be a film that you thought you disliked for some reason, and you think, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to give that another try.
Film that I'd most like to revisit. Maybe Catherine Bigelow's Detroit. Which I think most people kind of felt kind of ambivalent toward. That seemed to be the consensus. You know, it has this sweeping historical scope, but the main bulk of the action takes place in a single house, and it's this protracted, almost like home invasion horror sequence that a lot of people found like too intense and off-putting, like maybe because of the kind of genre positioning of the film in the vein of, you know, something like Zero Dark 30 or whatever. Didn't expect something so intense and so disturbing, but I loved all of that and found the rest of it all around it a little bit unwieldy and oddly structured and oddly paced. But yeah, I'd say probably that's the one that I'd like to revisit.
Okay, mine would be Silence, Scorsese's latest, most recent film, which came out on the 1st of this year, which I saw in the first week of January, which...
Sorry to interrupt you, will we hold this discussion?
Oh, because it's going to be...
It's on my list.
Coming up later on?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so do you want to give me your number 9?
My number 9 is Good Time by Josh and Benny Safdie.
Okay, that's my number 8.
Okay, so should we just discuss it now?
Yeah,
then?
go into it, yeah.
Okay, I didn't see their previous films, either of them, but heaven knows what was on my radar, and I really want to kind of rush to watch that now, because Good Time, it feels like, and I've gone on record elsewhere saying this, but it feels like kind of a low-key minor film to feature in a top 10 for me. And I think that's a reflection perhaps of the broader culture at the moment, and the disintegration of, like, further disintegration of grand narratives, or at least the cinematic equivalent of a grand narrative. Like
for what, for instance?
Like, for instance, I mean, like, to put it into context, what I mean, like, it's 10 years since the abortive attempt to proclaim a renaissance in great American cinema. So, 10 years ago we had There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, Zodiac, Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And it felt like we were on the cusp of some cultural renaissance with regard to, like, great 70s style American films that were idiosyncratic, but also addressing grand themes. This, for me, seems kind of, obviously, very deliberately, very, very low key. And I'm very surprised that it's gotten the critical attraction that it did.
Of those 4 films that you mentioned from 2007, though, would you not put something like No Country for Old Men kind of on a par with something like this? It's a very nuts and bolts noir thriller that has a lot going on in terms of its broader themes.
It does, but I mean, the Coens, in the way that the Coens do, they managed to sort of figure dialogue which felt like kind of thematized monologues into that film.
Yeah, okay.
And although you've got that slightly in this film, in one scene at least, it doesn't really feel like the same kind of film for me. It feels like a very, the common term that I've seen is like high octane,
right,
or like adrenaline fueled, and it's got wall to wall music.
Would you put it kind of in the same category as something like Collateral?
Ooh, good question. Not until you'd asked. Maybe, perhaps. Did that comparison come up because a large chunk of it takes place in a car?
No, not so much. No, just I was thinking of other sort of filmmakers working in, because all of the films that you just mentioned, maybe with There Will Be Blood as a slight example, they're genre films to a certain extent.
Right.
And you have somebody like Michael Mann, Collateral probably being his last really well-received film to date. But you have something that works on that level of, like that pure sort of genre level, but has this poignancy and this kind of greater resonance beyond the literal.
Yes, which it manages to keep to a subtextual level. It doesn't it's not like grandstanding or aggrandizing in that way. I liked it. I thought it was terrifically acted, very, very well directed. I've mentioned the wall-to-wall score. It's my favorite score of the year. I love those kinds of idiosyncratic films, like as character studies, as social portraits. The milieu, like Robert Pattinson is this amoral, main character, who's kind of awful, but really compelling.
And his awfulness becomes more apparent as the film wears on, and he becomes more desperate. He's as the film opens, I find him quite sympathetic.
Yeah, he's quite.
And as it goes on, you kind of lose your sympathy for him. And then you have the side plot with his brother, and the whole thing with, I'm not going to get into the plot and spoilers, but there are a lot of really memorable, really taboo breaking scenes in this as well. That scenes like you've seen many films that fit this broad kind of type, but I've never seen scenes like the scenes that make up this film. I loved it.
Yeah, great. I'd like to see it again because actually, it might have actually been higher up my list had I had time in which for it to kind of cement its place there, because I watched it very recently for the sole purpose of catching up with it for this episode, and so it's very difficult sometimes to sort of match or handicap the emotional weight of that comes with intimacy and familiarity. So I've put it so far down my top 10 only to kind of instinctively counter my enthusiasm for it, because I'm very suspicious sometimes of my own enthusiasm for it.
Okay.
So it might even deserve to be higher up, but we'll see. Ask me this time next year if it's gone any further up.
Okay, now so you've revealed your 10 and 9, is that right?
Yeah.
And I've revealed 10, 9, 8.
Yeah.
So do you want to do 8 now?
Do another one.
Do you want to do another one? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please.
It's definitely not my 7.
Yeah, it's my number 8 is, so in contrast to Good Time, which I watched very recently. This is Tony Erdmann,
okay,
which for a lot of people would have been on last year's end of year lists because they were able to see it at Cannes and elsewhere.
And for me, it's on my list of shame.
It's on your list of shame, of course. Yeah. I had to wait, along with the mere mortals, to pay to see it earlier this year in the cinema. It's Maren Ada's 2.5 hour long,
2 3/4,
2 3/4 long, sorry, German comedy about the business world it's set in the business world. It's not really about it necessarily. In, let's say, contemporary Europe, Germany stands in for, what we might say is contemporary Europe. And it's about a woman and her estranged father, who is kind of a prankster and who wants to sort of reconnect with her, and gate crashes as a result. Her different business meetings and conferences and what else. And, you read the premise and you look at the stills from this film, and it obviously announces itself as a comedy, and you think, how is that nearly 3 hours long. You know, how can that even be justified, the length? And it's one of those where it's simultaneously, I think, far too long, and yet it flies by. And so I don't really know how it could be any shorter, but I think it definitely could be. But it's great. And when Daniel Blake won the Palme d'Or in 2016, a lot of people were, you know, flabbergasted and really irritated and annoyed and angry that this film hadn't won the Palme d'Or. And I was pleased, sight unseen, that Loach had won it again, because, you know, I was of the mindset, me not being a Cannes, I was at the mindset that, you know, the more people Loach can upset, the better. Then I saw Daniel Blake and I thought, wow, that's such a dud. That's such an emotionally flat film for me and whatever else. And then I watched this, and in retrospect, yeah, I'm kind of with the folks that were really angered by it, the decision not to award it the Palme d'Or that year, because I think it is really great. It's very sharp. It's excellently acted. And it has this idiosyncrasy to it where you're not quite sure where it's going to go, because ostensibly it's working within, you know, the ordinary framework of a drama, and yet because of its length, because of its kind of meandering nature, you're not quite sure emotionally or tonally where it's going to go and how it's going to get there. So I recommend that for you to see. I
will see it at some point. I just found the combination of the running time and the premise really off-putting. It sounded like something that Will Ferrell should be starring in.
Isn't that also a description of the Habitus podcast?
But the prospect of a nearly 3-hour art house German farce was never that appealing to me, and the critical acclaim wasn't quite enough to overcome that.
You know, I wonder if the fallout, which was quite significant after it didn't win the Palme d'Or, was actually the reason why Ruben Östlund's The Square won the Palme d'Or this year, because that's another sharp European comedy.
He's affiliated with Roy Anderson, isn't he? It's a similar kind of...
Yes, yeah. But it's also 151 minutes.
Right.
So, you know, maybe it was like, you know, the Cannes equivalent of like awarding a film the Best Picture Oscar because of past misdeeds or injustices. Anyway, yes, that's my number 8.
And are you looking forward to the American remake potentially starring Jack Nicholson?
I wasn't when it was announced, but then I'm like, you know what? Again, you know, when everyone started to express their sort of annoyance at it, I was like, who cares, you know? If it's going to get Jack Nicholson back, sure, why not? Yeah. Great. I can definitely see him in the role.
So it would be Kristen Wiig and Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, I can see that. I don't know why they're making it again.
90 minutes.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, that'll be that'll be in my top 10 immediately. Yeah, no, I recommend it. It's good.
All right, so my number 7 is a film that I'm pretty sure I might be the only person in the world to have it on their top 10. It's 47 Meters Down. Okay.
What is 47
you know this one?
Meters Down? No.
All right. Okay. So
is it about a bunch? Is it about 40? No. Is it about a bunch of miners going 47 meters down?
No. It's a horror thriller about two sisters. About two sisters played by Mandy Moore and Claire Holt, who are holidaying in Mexico, and they go cage diving. They hire a kind of a slightly off the books kind of guy played by Matthew Modine to bring them out and put them into a cage to swim with great white sharks. The cable supporting the cage breaks, and they sink 47 meters down to the bottom of the ocean. They have a limited air supply. There are great white sharks in the water, so they can't leave the cage. They can't swim directly up because they got the bends. They can't swim directly to the surface. So what are they going to do? How are they going to survive? Okay. I actually saw this last year. The story behind this one is that it was produced by Dimension Films. They were going to put it out straight to home media in August of 2016. But in June, I think, of that year, The Shallows came out with Blake Lively. And that was a big hit and had a very similar premise. So this other distributor, Entertainment Studios, came in and bought the film from Dimension and cancelled the home release with the intention of putting the film in theaters in summer of 2017 in the same window that The Shallows had opened in. But because the transaction took place so close to the scheduled release date, the film was briefly available on like Amazon Video, and it was on shelves in Walmart, and like review copies had been sent to critics and stuff. So before Entertainment Studios came in and shut that all down, it was never officially released though. but it's out in the world, obviously. So I saw this film. It was actually, Dimension had changed the title as well to In the Deep. So In the Deep leaked in 2016, but 47 Meters Down was released officially in 2017. So I saw this at the end of last year, and I saw it again this year. I think it's an excellent film. I think it's easily one of the best shark films ever made.
The best shark? Is it better than like Sharknado?
I've never seen those films, but it's like for me the best shark films ever. Obviously, the best one is Jaws. Yeah. The runners up would be like Jaws 2, right. Deep Blue Sea, and this.
Right. Like, how are they characters talking to one another? Like, how does that work?
They have in their diving masks. They have radios, but they can communicate with the people on the surface as well. But they're just out of range, so to communicate, they have to leave the cage.
Oh, right, okay.
Right, so...
that sounds good.
Yeah, it's very tense. It's also very... What I really appreciated about it aesthetically as well, not just aesthetically, but also dramatically, was that once the women are in the water, once they're underwater, we never cut back to the surface. So even though they're communicating with the people on the boat, we stay on the bottom of the ocean for the whole film. So you have this, like, blue saturation, right. Which... it starts to kind of play tricks with your vision, you know. Like there's a sequence.
I imagine there's a murkiness to it as well.
Yeah. There's a sequence where she has to swim. Like they're trying to stay as close to the bottom of the. They're trying to stay on the ocean bed as much as possible, to be safer. But there's a sequence where she has to swim into like open water over like an abyss, and it's like unbearably tense, like so horrifying. Like, you know, that sense, like, you know, in Jaws when the like in the opening scene of Jaws where the woman is attacked while night swimming, and that sense of like complete helplessness. Humans in the water, like, we're not supposed to be there. We're so helpless. This takes it and puts it like, this is like, you know, the sequence where Hooper goes to investigate Ben Gardner's boat in Jaws, and like the severed head falls out, and it's in the middle of the night, and he's underwater. Yeah. The shark doesn't make an appearance in that scene. Yeah. But this film is like that scene stretched out to 90 minutes. Like that fear of like, they could come from any angle, and like, I'm so helpless down here.
I mean, the sea is terrifying anyway. I mean, you've just said we're not meant to be there. I totally agree with you. Why do we go there? Don't go. Like, I'm reminded just from your description of it, of, you know, we've mentioned, we discussed in a previous episode, Deep Rising.
Right.
You know, the sequence where they just have to swim under the water to get to another part of the ship. And also, is it Alien Resurrection? Yeah, with the underwater xenomorph. Oh, yeah.
So this was directed. Like This was directed by a guy named Johannes Roberts, who is not like a well-known director. He directed a horror film last year called The Other Side of the Door, which was very badly received, and he's done a few other like direct-to-video things in the past. But somehow he wrangled himself in above the title credit on this one, so it's technically Johannes Roberts, 47 Meters Down.
Like Francis Ford Coppola.
Or, you know, right, John Carpenter. But like it was a huge hit this summer, a substantial hit, and he's directing a sequel called 48 Meters Down in 2019, which has a really cool, eerie premise as well. It's different characters, but it's set, I think it's set in Brazil, and it's about a group of women who they don't want the tourist experience. They want like a sort of a special, different experience, and they're given a recommendation to go to this place where apparently there are these sunken ruins, and they go diving in these sunken ruins. But there are sharks in the ruins. It's like, that sounds like really potentially very eerie. I just hope they do the same thing of not cutting back to the surface at all and just staying underwater. Because the blue saturation really works. It's almost like Derek Jarman's Blue.
Yeah,
you know, but with a different cause of death.
Yeah, wow! It sounds like a real avant-garde horror film, actually.
I wouldn't quite go that far. I don't want to oversell it in that respect. It's very much just like a straightforward genre film that it worked very well for me. People have two issues with it. One is the ending. They do something in the last like 15 minutes that a lot of people don't like. I actually do like it, but then in the scene that follows that, I think having done what they've done, they need to make a different decision in the final scene, and I have an issue with the final scene. And people also have an issue with the dialogue in the film. Like they're expecting like David Mamet or something like that. This is like, it doesn't exactly sparkle, but it's functional. Right. And my issue is that there's a little bit too much of it. But beyond that, I think silence would have been the bolder choice in some of the sequences. But
well, maybe if he's going to go down the route of making a trilogy of these kinds of films, maybe the third one can be just one guy or one girl down there.
Yeah, The Shallows was one.
Yeah.
Was just Blake Lively.
I didn't see The Shallows. Did you see Open Water?
Yeah, way back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Way back. Really? Is it at all?
2003 it came out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I feel like it was just last year that came out. Right? Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I noticed when I texted you my rough list for this, you were like, oh, okay, I've seen that, and I'll see if I can make time to see this and this, and you just completely ignored 47 Meters Down.
Yeah, I know, I did. I know. No, when you sent me that list, though, all of the other films, apart from one, let's say, which was higher on the list, so I prioritised it more. All the other ones were already on my radar, and for some reason, 47 Meters Down hadn't gained enough traction for me to take notice. Which I apologise on air.
Not at all. I mean, I'm in the minority in thinking as highly of the film as I do. Critics are kind of split down the middle, and like the Rotten Tomatoes, I think it has a 54% approval rating. So the way that works, but so it's just shy of being fresh, but it's
get you.
Yeah, I mean it's up there with so it's up there with Deep Blue Sea and Jaws 2. So take that for whatever it's worth to you.
I haven't seen Jaws 2.
Well, that's up there with Deep Blue Sea and 47 Meters Down.
Okay, good to know. Can you think of any other non-sea, non-oceanic horrors to which it might be compared?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, because the film it's a subgenre that I really like, which is the contained survival horror. So there's a 2010 film called Frozen, which is unrelated to the Disney Snowman movie.
I remember you speaking very highly of that.
Right, okay, yeah. It's about 3 people who get stuck on a ski lift after the ski resort closes for the holidays. Really cool. I love them. Some people hate them. Like, when you read reviews of these films, there are always people like nitpicking them to death, but I always find the premises really compelling. But the kind of the ne plus ultra of the subgenre would have to be Buried with Ryan Reynolds.
Of course, yeah. Another one that I didn't see. As you can see, I'm such a fan of this show. No, I am as well. But for some reason, I don't identify myself, and this is perhaps evident from the preceding 8 episodes that we've done. I don't identify as like a horror buff, so I don't actively seek out all of the films in one genre, and to the degree that you have.
And yet, every horror film that we've talked about, you've enjoyed.
I have. Yeah. I know. It's true. I know. Maybe I'm
turning a corner.
The year in which, 2018. Is the year in which at 30 years old, I suddenly start to hunt down all the horror films that I've missed. Okay, shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Let's hear your number 7.
My number 7 is A Quiet Passion by Terence Davies. Is this going to be on your list?
Yeah, we're going to have to hold off on that one. That's higher on mine.
We will hold off in that case.
All right, so my number 6 is a film that you mentioned. I believe you mentioned it as the film that you want to revisit, which was Scorsese's Silence.
Yes.
That's my number 6.
This is a film I want to revisit.
Yeah.
You go ahead. You tell me what you thought, because you think more highly of it than I do.
Okay, yeah. So I think there was a point about a third of the way through this, maybe halfway through this. Actually, this is another one that I need to revisit, but not because I feel that I need to rediscover it, but just because it's been nearly a year since I've seen it. And I also had to leave to go to the toilet halfway through, so I missed a key scene. When I came back, my friend was like, what just happened? Oh my god. So anyway, it
is a long film.
Sorry?
It is a long film, to be
fair. Yes, it is. There was a point about a third of the way through the film where I thought that, like, this is the best film Scorsese has ever made. I don't want to go into specifics about what exactly was happening. The Andrew Garfield character was watching something very horrifying happening to some of the Japanese Christians, and I just found it so incredibly, like, overwhelmingly powerful. I think the second half of the film becomes a bit overly discursive when they're imprisoned. Is that a spoiler? When they're imprisoned, said it, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't know. It would be, if it's not in my top 5 Scorsese films, it's close to it.
Wow.
I think it's excellent and underrated. And I also found some of the critical response to it really annoying. like people were using it as an opportunity to like trumpet their atheism. Like they couldn't identify with the character because just step on the face of Jesus. I mean, what's the big deal? It's just a face. It's, as though you need to believe what a character believes in order to empathize with their situation. Which I found really disingenuous because that's not something that critics tend to do. Generally, it felt like this opportunistic atheist grandstanding.
It is pronounced when there's religion involved, especially Christianity at the moment. It does happen though, like with regard to like, the characters aren't relatable. I mean, like, none of the characters in Good Time are relatable, I don't think, in terms of their moral sensibilities or mindsets. But like, I carried on watching it.
You don't even need to see yourself in a character to find the character interesting and compelling.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Let me ask you a question. Do you think Andrew Garfield was appropriately cast?
Yeah, I thought he was good, yeah. I would have liked a little more about Adam Driver. If I have a casting issue with the film, it's actually Liam Neeson. I've never been like a huge Liam Neeson fan. I like his trashy thrillers. I like his the last 10 years of Taken and Nonstop and that kind of thing. And The Grey.
You love the Grey.
I really love The Grey. The Grey is a cut above. The Grey is a cut above the other films that he's done. It's more in the vein of something like Good Time, where it's not that it's similar in terms of its story or anything, but just in terms of being like, okay, well, this is a thriller, but it's about a lot of things subtextually as well. I thought it was excellent. Right. But anyway, I was acutely aware when he showed up that this was originally Daniel Day-Lewis's role.
And Lewis would be able to tease out all of the intricacies of that role, right? Of the role that Liam Neeson plays, that I agree he doesn't quite nail for some reason, but it might be also part of the fact that the film does settle in its second half into this sort of repetitive routine, deliberately, of course, very, very. It needs to structurally and everything else. I'm just trying to figure out a way in which it could have perhaps been a little bit more compelling without abandoning what is a necessary structure.
I did. I like the second half of it as well. It is a film of two halves. But I want to watch it again. It's my most
the film most in need of rewatch for me, because I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I didn't have any hopes for it. I didn't have any expectations really. I was a little bit bored. I didn't want to be bored because of its subject matter or because of its religious elements. I'm not sure if I was because of that or not. I don't know, to be frankly.
Just to be clear, I'm not religious at all and never have been. But sure. I am interested in religion, and I am interested in theology and that kind of the thought processes behind it, but I don't know.
But I to be honest, I still don't know if my lack of connection to the movie was because of its subject matter somehow. I don't know.
But like, would you have felt the same way about like, this kind of tortured kind of exploration of a kind of the filmmaker's lapsed faith is something that, say, somebody like Ingmar Bergman did repeatedly. And I don't think I ever saw a critic saying, like looking back at their responses and even the contemporary responses to these films when they come out on the Criterion Collection or something like that is not would the characters not just get over it and,
Are you trying to goad me into dismissing Ingmar Bergman's filmography on air here? Because I can if you want me to.
You know what I mean, though?
No, No, I get all of that, and I totally agree with it, which is why I'm wanting to sort of challenge what I suspect is my own critical prejudice. But I admired it a lot. I certainly didn't dislike the film. When I watched it, it did make me yearn for Robert De Niro kicking someone's skull in from Goodfellas.
And I actually haven't seen any of Scorsese's other religious films. I haven't seen The Last Temptation of Christ. I haven't seen Kundum.
Similarly weak for me, to be honest, really? within the context of his whole filmography. There's something, but what kind of drew me to this film after watching it was reading Adam Neyman's piece on it for Reverse Shot? I think it might have been. And he teased out the positives from this film, and he says, Scorsese is known for his stylistic excess. and the ways in which he, gives, the way he explores violence and Catholicism and, religion and whatever else. But when the religious elements of those films are foregrounded to the degree that this is, and in Last Temptation, he embodies and articulates a restraint.
Right.
And
Okay.
that really kind of brought me around to wanting to watch the film again and to watch it with a different eye. But yeah, no, I'm happy that it's on your list. I'm glad we got to discuss it very briefly.
Okay, so let's hear your 6.
So my 6th placed film is Get Out by Jordan Peele, which you mentioned earlier in your honourable mentions.
It's probably my number 11. I left it off the list after it was kind of between that and I don't know, I always find that my top 5 or 6 is quite easy, comes quite naturally, and then I kind of agonize over the lower.
Because they
numbers.
tend to be more interchangeable, I guess.
Yeah.
And also,
they also seem to be the ones that I don't remember as clearly, generally speaking. It's the ones where I'm kind of going, if I went back and watched Get Out or 20th Century Women or Logan again, how would I feel about all? Because I saw them all in February, March,
Yeah. No, I get that. I wonder, let me just ask you briefly, you mentioned cutting it off your list, but it would be number 11. Was your decision to leave it off informed in any way by the fact that it's number 1 on Sight and Sound's list? Just in terms of not an overtly self-aware political gesture, but just in order to sort of allow us to discuss more films, because you wouldn't have had a chance to discuss Logan, I guess.
No.
Okay. Sorry, I asked that there as the contrarian that I am. I just assume that everybody else operates by the same rules. Okay, so Get Out, as I mentioned, was Sight and Sound's best film of the year, as voted for by however many critics. I liked it a lot. It is a horror film.
Mm-hmm, sure.
There's
a bit of hand wringing over the semantics when it came out. There was. We don't want to, but there's. Even It that came out in September, which is a horror film, without any kind of, there's no reasonable argument to be made that it isn't. People were saying that it isn't, because some people have this notion in their heads that if it's horror, it must be terrible. So if it's good, then by definition, it can't be horror.
Yeah, and if it's horror, it's completely reflective of a cultural disdain with which genre in general and horror in particular are approached and treated and received. For me, it's a great crossover film. This, comes in the wake of It Follows, with which it shares a general milieu in terms of creepy suburbia,
right?
But it's obviously in a very, very, very different vein stylistically as also. But I think the reason why it's been embraced is not only because it's a technically accomplished film, extremely well acted, but it also packs the punch of, in the current climate, being explicitly about racial politics in America.
Yeah. There's another thing aside from just a generalized kind of disdain for the horror genre. There's a tendency. It comes from the same disdain, but there is a sort of an opportunistic tendency when you have a horror film that is not only a horror film, but it's also a comedy, it's also a satire, it's also a thriller, to try to emphasize those other genre elements over the horror element. So even in the case of something like It, which is a supernatural horror film, it was, it's a coming of age thriller, right? A psychological thriller, it's about a demonic entity that's eating children, but whatever. So Get Out was similar. It was it's a thriller, it's a satire,
I want to know, to what extent do you think is it fair to judge a film that's been received as a horror, to criticize it on the grounds that it's not scary?
I don't think that's fair at all, because how many films are scary?
Well, it's exactly. And also there's gradients of scares, and there's kinds of scares, right? And different modes and tropes that factor into what is scary.
I also don't like the tendency. Sorry, I also don't like the tendency to reduce the horror genre to an engine for producing a particular physical response.
that's a great way to put it.
Or the similar kind of way, like, oh well, I didn't laugh out loud watching this comedy, therefore it's not good. A comedy is still a film. I mean, it can be good as a film. I watched the like Alexander McKendrick's The Lady Killers last year. I didn't really laugh out loud while watching it, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thought it was an excellent film. I don't laugh out loud watching Charlie Chaplin films.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, but you watch films like that at the cinema. When you get like repertory screenings, and there is a performative bullshit that manifests itself in the auditorium, I think, and I get very cynical with regard to judging the people who do that. Like laughing out loud at like Chaplin. I mean, come on, it's not going to happen. Anyway, yeah. So getting back briefly to Get Out, I thought it was an extremely funny film, also. And somebody else, I was reading about it the other day, and somebody else had written about its depiction of microaggressions in awkward social circumstances, not just awkward social circumstances, but awkward social circumstances that are deeply informed by racial politics. And the ways in which the protagonist has to deal with, endure, even ignore, the casual, deep-seated prejudices that are liberalized and expressed in such a way at the party. I think it has possibly the best opening scene of the year's films. Possibly, although that's something that I'm just saying there without having thought about it previously.
Yeah, it has a lot of memorable scenes. It kind of walks a line between personality and idiosyncrasy on one side, and even eccentricity, but on the other, a little bit of a sense of being a little bit jumbled. Like there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ideas thrown in here that don't 100% mesh for me, but I'd rather have a surplus than a deficit, in that respect.
Right, I get you. Have you seen Key and Peele?
No, I never watched it. I also didn't see the film they were in last year, Keanu, the one about the two guys trying to get their cat back.
I didn't see that. Have you seen the TV show Atlanta?
No.
Okay, so there's an episode late on in its first season. I watched it earlier this year. And there's an episode called Juneteenth, and in 30 minutes it covers very similar ground to Get Out, albeit in a more explicitly comical vein.
Is Jordan Peele involved in this show?
No.
Okay.
But it's about the liberal, the ways in which American liberals, I guess, treat and deal with with race. Mm-hmm. And class also, but race primarily. And it's a great biting, cutting reading of that. And I was reminded of it when I was watching this film. But yeah, Get Out. My number 6, Get Out, Jordan Peele.
All right. Okay. I have a feeling that I might regret not having that on my top 10. It might be like looking back in a couple of years thinking like, how did I leave that off in favor of 20th Century Women or 47 Meters Down? Because when I look back at my end of year lists, they're always like how did I put Tangerine above Mad Max Fury Road?
Anyway. I was asked a couple of years back, I was asked to take part in Sight and Sound's poll on the best LGBT films ever made. And earlier that week, I'd seen Tangerine, and I voted for fucking Tangerine in it. And I'm like, well, months, even weeks later, I'm thinking back, just thinking, well, that's absurd.
I like Tangerine, but I mean,
ever, yeah, but
I've no, I have no overwhelming desire to revisit it.
But I was obviously struggling to come up with LGBT films that I'd seen,
Okay, well, we move on to my number 5 is next, right?
Yeah.
All right, my number 5 is probably the most accidental entry in this list. It's Chan-wook Park's The Handmaiden, which I saw one afternoon just to kill time. About 8 weeks after it was released, it was still playing in one of the cinemas in Dublin. So I just dropped in and had pretty middling expectations because generally speaking, I haven't been a big fan of Park's output. I've seen most of his films. I've seen everything. I think I've seen. Oh no, sorry. The only film of his that I haven't seen, except for the two early ones that aren't really available, is his comedy "I'm a Cyborg," but that's okay. I skipped that one.
Right.
But all the others I've seen, and thought they were all kind of like okay to like pretty good, you know. But I've never been a big fan of him the way that a lot of people are. But this I loved.
Right. Okay.
It's based on a novel by Sarah Waters called Fingersmith, which is set in Victorian London, but it's transplanted to 1930s Korea. And it's about thieves con men, who send one of their own to become the handmaiden to this wealthy woman, and it's densely plotted. There are several huge twists along the way. The way that you think everything was going is the exact opposite of the way it's going, and then it switches back again. And is
it a slow burner?
Not really.
For some reason, I don't know why. I just have a feeling that it's going to be like insufferably slow for me to watch.
I found it really riveting. It's beautiful, and it's.
I can imagine it being atmospheric and like with a lot of like internalized incident rather than like, you know, externalized dramatic action. I don't know why. I'm just seeing that sight unseen.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not wrong.
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. It's not the reason that I hesitate to answer is I'm not sure. It's certainly not as like violent or as kind of structured around like, you know, set pieces the way that like something like Old Boy is. You know, there's nothing like that in there. It's in fact that the reason is that it's much more character based than those films. Really, it's much more. I connected with it emotionally in a way that I haven't connected with any previous Park film.
So, do you think it's his most mature work?
I always hesitate to assess the maturity of somebody who's 20 years older than me.
I'm coming up with all the complicated questions today.
That was actually something that I always thought was quite funny about like young film buffs who were like, you know, 18 and they're calling the new Scorsese film so immature, like a 60-year-old guy. Like, how do you know?
It's his most mature work to date.
No, it's by far my favorite Park film.
Okay, and his most mature.
Certainly his most mature. His most erotic. It's great, you know.
Oh, it is?
Oh yeah, sure.
It's erotic also?
Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
It's an erotic thriller. It's an erotic thriller.
Okay.
Okay. Great film, yeah.
Okay, maybe I should push to that one. Okay, so my number 5, I believe we'll also be discussing later, so we need to skip it because it's in The Eyes of My Mother.
The Eyes of My Mother, yeah, we're gonna have to hold off on that for a while.
Okay. So that was going to be my number 5. Well, it is my number 5. We'll discuss it later because it'll pop up again.
So my number 4.
Give me your number 4.
My number 4 is Blade Runner 2049.
Okay, which we're going to be discussing later.
Okay.
Because it's higher up on my list than it is on yours. My number 4. Unless you want to.
No. Go ahead.
Okay.
Unless yours is right beside mine. Is Blade Runner is not your number 3?
Nope.
Okay,
but we haven't said my number 4 yet.
No, I'm just saying that if... Okay,
yeah.
Whatever, okay, go ahead.
My number 4 is Bertrand Bonello's Nocturama, which
we discussed already, we can just move on.
Well, we did. We discussed it on our second episode in the context of films with varying proximities to real-life crime or horror. I feel like it got short shrift in terms of airtime on that episode. I would be happy to sing its praises again. I just think it's kind of I'll keep it brief, I promise. But it was a formative viewing experience or viewing experiences for me watching this year, and not only that, but also the process of discussing it with colleagues and friends who had also seen it. Because I don't know, I've undergone some kind of critical shift this year. which has been assisted and accelerated actually by starting this podcast. So thank you for that, Bobby, and Happy New Year and all. But Nocturama provides an ambiguity and a space in its aesthetics in which the viewer becomes an active. I've never liked to delineate between active and passive consumption. I don't.
That's always felt self-congratulatory to me.
Yes,
like is. Outwardly, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're sitting, sitting and looking.
However,
I'm thinking much more intensely than you are, though. Is effectively what that's saying.
Yeah, it is. No, but what I mean by that is that this film sets up a number of interpretations, and provides a space in which each of those interpretations can be legitimized by the act of processing it and talking about it and discussing the film, and it doesn't provide any easy answers to any of the complicated solutions.
It's cryptic, and it's premised on seemingly sort of contradictory sentiments coexisting.
Yes,
and almost like it's sort of presents a sort of a starkly counterintuitive kind of scenario.
Yeah.
That kind of challenges you to try to make sense of it.
And the reason why I'm praising it in that context is because it did confirm, as I say, what felt like for me a kind of a long form gradual shift away from one critical position to another. And I guess another work this year that helped me along that process was Twin Peaks, which obviously we covered in our first episode, and which isn't a film, and which won't be featuring on either of our top 10s.
But Michael,
this year.
It was on Sight and Sound's best film poll.
Yeah. We won't get into that. But so my number 4 is Nocturama, Bertrand Bonello. I guess it would have been in a lot of people's top 10s last year because it was a 2016 film, but it wasn't released until this year.
Yeah.
I still don't feel like I've seen it properly because I've only seen it on a bad quality stream and a bad quality projection in Bulgaria earlier this year. I'm convinced it was just like a download from online.
Yeah, it got no theatrical release here. It was straight to Netflix.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful film. It's a really beautiful, well put together, visually striking film, and so it kind of needs to be seen on the best format that you can.
Again, one of my honourable mentions. I thought it was excellent. I really liked it. It wasn't quite as like rapturously, like magnetically engaging for me as thematically compelling as House of Tolerance, which was my favourite film of 2012. But I also like looking at Bonello's other films. I've never felt, for some reason, despite how much I loved House of Tolerance, I've never felt compelled to go and look at his other movies, just based on their premises.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think his cause is always aided by his sense of musicality.
Very much so. Yeah.
Taste in music, which keeps you watching. Anyway, that's my number 4, and I want to know what your number 3 is now.
My number 3 has been mentioned already, and it's Terence Davis's A Quiet Passion.
Okay, which may have been higher on my list had I seen it more recently. I saw this first.
Sorry, what number was that on yours? Number 6, was it?
It's my number 7.
Number 7.
And I haven't seen it since its premiere and the out of competition in the Berlin Film Festival in February 2016. I reviewed it from that festival for IndieWire. I was a massive fan of it, sung its praises, sung it to high heavens, in fact, and just haven't had a chance to watch it since. So it's like I can't really remember it. I only remember loving it. Tell me, what did you like and love about this film?
I remember you mentioning to me that it was, I can't remember your exact words. I actually asked you for them, and you couldn't remember them either. But it was something like, it starts off as a sort of a.
I think I was quoting.
That's right. You were quoting
Joshua Slater Williams's piece in the Skinny on the film, in which he said it began. I forget also, but he says it began like one film and ended up like a Dreyer-like death crawl.
Right,
Dreyer-like death crawl.
So you were saying to me that you were quoting another critic, and you said that the film ends up as or begins as a kind of light sort of period drama, witty dialogue and everything, and then it ends up as a Dreyer-like death crawl.
Yeah, that's right.
I actually misremembered what you said to me then, and I thought that you had said that it was love and friendship meets cries and whispers. But I think that came out of my own head. That came out of my own head, apparently. Yeah. But that's a pretty apt description of it. But
it's also a premise that you would be very much drawn to, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I really enjoyed Love and Friendship, the Kate Beckinsale film from last year. Walt Whitman, not Walt Whitman.
Whit Stillman.
Walt Whitman. Whit Stillman. And I've always been a big fan of Cries and Whispers as well, but the combination of the two, it's really powerful to see the transformation of the character over the course of the film. And by the time it got to the end, death crawl is a good way to describe it. And the way that it deals with mortality and like the inner life of the character and her sense of individuality and her situation within the kind of the wider social context and the structures of tradition and power. His best film since The Long Day Closes. His first two, like The Distant Voices Still Lives and The Long Day Closes, I think are just absolute masterpieces. I think he has struggled to reach that level again since, even though I think all of his films are good.
Well, he shifted into literary adaptations that weren't autobiographical.
Right. I mean, like the first film that he made after The Long Day Closes was The Neon Bible, which has very much the same visual style as those first two films, but feels kind of like applied style. It's like, I've taken someone else's material, similar to the way that like Bela Tarr made The Man from London, and you're watching it going, why is this film, this like noir thriller shot in this style? It just doesn't work. I get it. So he kind of drifted away from that stylistically, and then, he made things like The House of Mirth and Sunset Song. Actually, the one exception in there is The Deep Blue Sea, which does bear a lot of aesthetic similarity to those early films. But no, I mean, A Quiet Passion for me is easily the best thing he's done since The Long Day Closes. I loved it.
I would love to see it again, actually. The performances are great. I love that sequence, the visual effect of the characters growing older.
Yeah, it's great.
Like it approximates the Daguerre type. And I don't know. I don't know if it was the screen on which I saw them put in, but it looks very digital as well, though. And that's obviously a budgetary thing, I think. Davies just doesn't get the budgets that his vision demands.
No, these are done on a shoestring, yeah.
And that
although Sunset Song, I thought looked quite. Sunset Song looked great, actually.
I didn't see Sunset Song,
but Sunset Song feels very much like, as it is, like a truncated novel, you know what I mean? Like there are parts of it where you're kind of going, this needed to be like, not just cut down, it needed to be streamlined and reconceptualized as a screenplay. Whereas this is obviously, it's an original screenplay based on the life of Emily Dickinson. And there's something about her passivity and like the sense of like this like vibrant inner life, but this outwardly she's just like occupying the same space and aging. You know what I mean? Like moving toward death, and I found it incredibly powerful. And like when she expresses those ideas, like Cynthia Nixon's performance is like so moving. Wonderful film. Okay, so what is your number 3?
My number 3 is Brawl in Cell Block 99,
which is my number 2.
Which is your number 2? Okay.
A lot of crossover on this list.
I know. It might have been my number 2, but for the fact that I'd seen at least one film that was definitely better, and my number 2 edged it for reasons I'll go into. But Brawl in Cell Block 99, my number 3, your number 2. What a powerful experience this is to go through. I mean, like, we're talking about like ordeal cinema at the moment. Reffin. Latter day of Lars von Trier, perhaps, filmmakers such as...
This is an interesting comparison, because generally the writer-director here, Stephen Craig Zoller, is compared to, like Tarantino and like Walter Hill and people like that. It's not, I've never heard a Refn or certainly von Trier comparison here. But I know what you're getting at. Yeah, it is kind of... because the comparison point here is the story of Ricky, the Chinese film about the guy who becomes wages a war of for justice inside the prison, and it's like this over the top gore fest, almost like comic book kind of thing. It's not anywhere near as somber or as sad as this, or as grueling as this. It's much more comic. This isn't really comical at all, actually.
Although it's an extremely funny film, though.
Yeah, no,
I laughed a great deal during this film, and I'm kind of pleased in a way that I didn't see it in the cinema with people.
It didn't get released in cinemas here.
I think I would have been classified as a disturbing character because of the extent to which I was laughing during scenes that is perhaps not a good idea not to laugh at. And I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that a large part of that is the superlative way in which the film builds its tensions and induces in me a build-up of surplus nerves, so that when the tension does explode into action, I just laugh out of, I think, of relief. And also I love to see just fellas fighting each other when it's done right. And
this is done so right. This is done like there's a single master shot, and we see the entire fight play out without any cuts. It's great.
Yeah. So Vince Vaughn
let's just back up a little bit and say what the film's about, though.
Yeah. So Vince Vaughn plays a tow trucker who is sent to prison for 7 years, 3 or 4 years more than he's expecting to be sent down for drugs peddling, and when he's in prison, he receives a visit, saying that his pregnant wife, has been taken hostage, and that the unborn child will have its limbs removed by a Korean abortionist
in utero,
in town. If Vince Vaughn doesn't make his way to the prison's notorious cell block 99, which is a maximum security cell, which is off-site, a unit overseen by Warden Tuggs, as played by Don Johnson, the best prison warden I've encountered since Donald Sutherland's Warden Drungoon in Lockup, the John Flynn film, the sorely underrated John Flynn film.
I've actually never seen that.
We should cover it at some point in a future episode in 2018. I actually thought of suggesting John Flynn for a Journeyman episode, but anyway, we'll get to that. I thought this film was incredible. I didn't see Bone Tomahawk, the director's
I loved Bone Tomahawk. Bone Tomahawk actually made my top 10 of both 2015 and 2016 because my new eligibility criteria were introduced in 2016. So it was my number. It was my number 4, I think, of 2016, and my number 3 of 2015. So
right,
and we'll talk about his upcoming film as well in the next segment.
Okay,
but, he's absolutely one of the most interesting and exciting new filmmakers to come out in the last few years. I should say though that the reason that he's sent to prison is because he makes a purely moral decision. He has been hired he's working as a drugs courier, but his boss is doing this deal with this other crew, and he's forced to work with 2 of their members who are much more reckless than he is, and who start a firefight with the cops, and he could easily get away, but he goes back and kills his 2 accomplices because he doesn't want them to kill the cops. He puts himself in this position. He could easily escape, which sets up this character who accepts everything that comes to him. Like he's in a position in his life where everything has started to go right. He's about to be a father. The film opens with his marriage in a complete shambles, with an incredible scene that I don't even want to spoil. But the scene near the beginning where he takes out his rage about the current situation on an inanimate object is the moment that I decided not only that I loved the film, but that S. Craig Zoller was my new favorite filmmaker.
I mean, you were able to say that, I guess, on the strength of Bone Tomahawk, but it's a very early scene in the film to make that decision, though.
But it's so unique. It's it
is. It's very
crazily singular. The whole film, a singular sensibility.
I mean, in his Sight and Sound review from Venice, Neil Young mentioned the fact that this is much like a video game as well in terms of its structure and concept. He's got to go through certain levels. He's got to go from one place to the next, basically by punching people people's faces in.
Well, which is similar to something like The Raid. Did you see The Raid?
I didn't see The Raid, no.
Similar kind of thing where they have to make their way to the top floor of the building.
Right.
And it becomes more and more challenging, and they're fighting more and more like dangerous people as they get to the top.
And that was also highly acclaimed in terms of its choreography, right?
Yeah, very much so.
To my understanding, very different to this.
Very much so. Yeah, that was a martial arts movie. This isn't.
Yeah, like this is unusually slow burn though, and like Vince Vaughn's performance is so physical, which is a kind of a cliched thing to say about films like this, but like he's given the space.
I mean, it's his best performance of all time, easily by
you think
wide margin. I mean, what compares?
Yeah. True Detective season 2.
No.
No, I mean like it's the polar opposite as well to something like Swingers.
Yeah.
And there's layers to it because ostensibly it's a very thin premise. It's a very kind of gratuitously violent film on the surface. And yet, you know, there I was watching it thinking, as soon as it finished, I wanted to watch it again.
Me too. Yeah. I would have just put it straight on again.
It's really weird. Yeah.
The really important thing about the film is that, and when you compare it to something like The Story of Ricky, aside from the difference in tone, is the way that the characterization, is the way that Bradley is set up as this person who will make a purely moral decision without any regard for his own self-interest, and the way in which he just accepts all of the when he makes the moral decision, he knows that he's going to go to jail for it. And he accepts that in the moment, but he has no idea what's coming next or what's coming down the line. You know what I mean? Like what he's going to be forced to do. And
I mean, in the very, very first scene of the film, he loses his job. He's laid off, and because he's like, you know, Zola is able to frame him in such a way because he's so tall, Vince Vaughn. But he frames him in such a way where like he towers over everyone. He's obviously a bit like of a hard nut, and like we're led to believe he's going to kick off here and going to smash someone's face in. Never does.
Yeah.
And you're always waiting for that. And I was thinking he's going to kick off here because everyone's been a shit face to him, like in prison. And it's not the case. He kicks off only out of necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and his
hand is forced.
His hand is forced, and his the fact that, without getting into spoilers, where the film ultimately ends up, there's this like undercurrent, this like undertow of like melancholy to the whole thing, and self-sacrifice. Like because he did the right thing at the beginning, and this is the consequence of all of this, and like, to kind of lose it all, and I mean, like even you mentioned in your summary the fact that when his pregnant wife is kidnapped, the threat is that her unborn child is going to have her limbs amputated in utero. Mm-hmm. Is something that I've never seen before in any film, and it's so horrifyingly cruel.
It is. And even visually, the film turns from a very blue palette to an extremely brown, shitty one, and it's like this rustic, fiery hellhole into which he's descending, and you just know it's going to get worse, and he's going to have to make decisions and do things that make certain things irretrievable.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic.
Yeah, he knows. He knows that that there's no going back from where he's headed, and he goes there. He just accepts it and goes, and methodically makes his way. To Cell Block 99.
Abominably, it has an abominable linearity to it, as I wrote in my capsule review. In fact, it's the first film I've watched this year that as soon as it finished I wanted to write about it, which obviously being a kind of a full-time critic, I only do these days if I'm going to get paid for it, and I was just like, wow, I just need to get this out of my system. I need to articulate something here. I need to process my thoughts on it.
So are you gonna watch Bone Tomahawk?
Yeah, I'm going to watch it very soon. I want to watch Brawl in Cell Block 99 before it, though, somehow. Okay. I want to watch it again. Talking about Brawl in Cell Block 99 as my number 3 has made me want and wish that it was my number 2, like yours. But we are, I put it as my number 3, so I have to stick to it now. My number 2 is Blade Runner 2049.
Which is my number 4.
Which is your number 4.
Yeah.
Great film, really, really beautiful extension of the 1982 film by Ridley Scott.
And yet very, very different in many ways.
Very much so. I always struggled to get on board with Scott's film. I watched a Spanish film, a 60-minute Spanish experimental film made in shot in Benidorm a few years back, called Android's Dream. By Ion de Souza, and I always preferred, well, not always, since watching that, I preferred that as an adaptation of the Philip K. Dick novel. Having been to Los Angeles since then, I don't know, and visited the Bradbury Building and, on a very superficial, vague level, connected with its iconography of the first film. I rewatched Blade Runner recently again, the director's cut, or the final cut, I think it is, and loved it, like totally loved it, in a way that I never expected to.
Me too. Actually, I watched it before seeing this one as well, and I've always liked it, but it's always been something that I kind of admired, and it didn't really move me. But this time with the final cut, it did. I thought it was. I think it's a pretty beautiful film.
And so I went into this one with high expectations, doubly high, not only because I'd finally connected with the first one, but also because it's Denis Villeneuve, whose filmography, like, I haven't seen all of his films. The ones I do, I haven't seen the one that I dislike yet. I love Sicario. I loved it at the time, but I love it especially in retrospect now that it's had like 2 years in which to sort of settle in my mind.
Right.
And another one that I really want to rewatch, Blade Runner 2049, I thought was a
Did you didn't see Arrival, did you?
I didn't see Arrival, no.
Right.
I didn't see Arrival.
Yeah, because I was coming off of, like, Sicario was on my top 10 of 2015, Arrival was on my top 10 of 2016, and I didn't like Prisoners. I have seen one that I didn't like.
I have Prisoners ready to watch, so I'll get back to you on that one. But I thought this was a beautiful, beautiful riff on, themes addressed in the first film, but in a very different way. It's essentially a detective story in which Ryan Gosling, the man of my year, plays a replicant called K in pursuit of what is thought to be the child of a human replicant relationship that's teased at in the first film, the son or daughter of Harrison Ford's character Deckard and his lover Rachel, who isn't in this film. Does the child exist? Does it not? I mean, so and at one point Kay is led to believe that he is this replicant. So the detective story is in pursuit of itself all of a sudden. I won't go any further than that, but there's various emotional tugs in this film that are deeply embedded in its, themes of existential angst and what it means to be human, what it means to be and what it means to exist.
Yeah. It's a much more heavily, densely plotted film with much more forward momentum than the original, which is quite lightly plotted. And like Deckard, infamously, Deckard doesn't actually do a whole lot of actual, detective work in the original.
In
it's
fact,
actually pretty easy.
Find him.
But the plot elements and the various kind of like complicating elements to the sequel, including like the Jared Leto character and so on. They provide kind of like a framework for looking at the themes of the film from a whole lot of different perspectives that the original film doesn't touch on. Like his not just, he's an artificial person, a replicant with another artificial person, an artificial intelligence who is his girlfriend. That's kind of like, I mean, the three-way scene with Joy and the prostitute whose name I forget, that was the highlight of the film for me. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, it's a very, very Dickian moment as well. It felt like it's the kind of scene that he would have come up with. Yeah, I totally agree. And also, like, how refreshing is it, by the way, to watch a film by somebody who's obviously a filmmaker?
Yeah.
Like, somebody who actually thinks in images and conceives action in images. And I mean, of course, it's true of all the films in our top 10. It's why they're there. But I mean, like, I've enjoyed some of the films this year that haven't quite made it because, like, for whatever reason, they just haven't had that kind of unique talent behind them. And I think Villeneuve, I think it's great that Villeneuve was able to even, be in a position to make this.
I just hope that the failure, and like it's a big failure commercially, I hope that doesn't impact his prospects for getting Dune made.
In the North America it was anyway, at least.
Internationally, like it made $280 million or something on a $175 million budget.
It's strange. I mean, it was strange that it was even greenlit though, because like Blade Runner's fan base, a film, it was never guaranteed to make money. It's weird. I don't know if they were like banking on like Harrison Ford, now he's freed up from Star Wars to like, make it. But like, Gosling doesn't have that much.
No, there's kind of a notion that Ryan Gosling is like this superstar who can open a movie. It's like he never has been.
Weird. I think he's better than that. Like I think he's a very, very fine actor.
Okay, so the film. Sorry, so I just looked it up. The film it made $258 million on a $150 million budget.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not great. It's
that's an
there won't be a third one, which I'm pleased with.
Certainly not. Not only is this the end of the Blade Runner series, this will discourage the pursuit of these kinds of like cerebral science fiction.
It's a shame. Projects. It's a real shame. For now, anyway. We're stuck with stuck with a new Star Wars film every Christmas. So that was my number 2, and now for the big one. Number one.
My number one
for you
is a film that I saw on the 1st of March, and before the film was even over, I knew that it would be my number 1 film of the year.
How far into it?
Well, the film is about 77 minutes long. I was probably about 40 minutes in, and I decided this is the best film of the year.
Okay, tell us.
The Eyes of My Mother.
Okay, which is my number 5.
Right. So this is the story of it's the setting is kind of ambiguous. It seems to be it's certainly set over a period of at least 20 years. Probably from kind of like the mid 60s to the mid 80s or mid to late 80s. It's about a young girl living on a farm in, again, the place is ambiguous, like the American Midwest, with her Portuguese mother, who is an eye surgeon, who works on like horses and cows and animals, and her father. And one afternoon, her mother is murdered in front of her by a drifter. When her father comes home, he finds the drifter still there, like playing with his wife's corpse in the bathtub, and the daughter kind of like sitting placidly and passively in the kitchen, and he imprisons he apprehends him and imprisons him in the barn. And it's like he doesn't know what it's like. He's just going to take care of it himself. They're not going to involve the police. That's just his instinctual reaction to this. And he's a very kind of distant father as well. He doesn't really engage with his daughter, and his daughter starts kind of tending to this guy in the barn. But the guy in the barn keeps screaming and making a lot of noise. And the father says, "You're going to have to take care of this," because the kid has picked up some surgical skills from her mother,
to say the least.
Yes. So she goes into the barn and she surgically removes his vocal cords and his eyes. Okay, and then she
didn't need to remove the eyes, to be fair, no, did she?
Sorry.
She didn't really need to remove the eyes, to be fair. It felt a little bit too harsh on the fella. I felt. He kind of like becomes like her pet, and I don't know how much more detail to go into. Let's just say that
I suppose I have to say to talk about the themes of the film. I have to say that eventually she's left alone, and the film is about loneliness and about like yearning for a connection, but it's all rendered in this grotesque, macabre, cruel way that is, I find, so affecting and so powerful. Like the film, as I say, I saw it in like 2 months into the year, and I had absolutely no doubts that there was not a chance that there would be a better film this year. And here we are.
It's an extremely disturbing film. As you mentioned in your summary there, it is set across multiple generations, or at least 2 decades.
Yeah, it would have to be at least 20 years.
And so there's ellipses in it, and there's jumps forward, and it's a very taut film. You mentioned that it's 77 minutes. It's shot in stunning black and white.
Written and directed by a first-time director named Nicholas Pesh.
Yes. Who is interested in all things weird, judging by his Twitter account.
Yes.
But there's a beautiful confidence to it. There's some wonderful, wonderful framing, and I think with a film of this kind, a debut feature of this kind, it could very easily have been more busy than it is. And I think there's a real confidence
very
in
controlled.
restraining itself to the
strength,
ideas that it does have.
Yeah, I agree. The strength and the clarity of the vision in its conception, and also then the precision and the control in execution. It reminded me of I said that Craig Zahler, kind of announced himself as okay, this is a filmmaker to follow, and Nicholas Pesh as well, but it reminded me of Robert Eggers' The Witch, which was one of my favorite films of last year. It was another incredibly confident, controlled, precise, visionary kind of debut film where you like a fully formed filmmaker just emerging out of nowhere. But yeah, I mean, all I can do is all I can hope is that he continues, as he said, his Twitter indicates that this is the case, but I just hope that he continues to work with subject matter that appeals to me as much as this does.
Yeah. Because Mark Kermode touched upon this when he reviewed it. He said it touches upon what we don't like this coinage, but it touches upon what others might refer to it or might have referred to at one point as torture porn.
Sure.
But it reworks it into this weird, disturbing family unit.
Right.
And so there's a horror there in terms of graphical depictions of things, but there's also a horror in its ideas, like conceptual horror, that makes you think.
We should say though that the film, even though I agree that it evokes some of the imagery that you would associate with the so-called torture porn, which is just basically torture porn is another way of saying is a kind of like moral panic reactionary way of saying sadistic splatter. Which is all it ever has been, and it's a way of kind of like judging that and denouncing that implicitly, even when you put it in scare quotes. I've always hated that term, but the violence and the torture is not on screen in this. It's only ever implied, but that's more than enough because it's so disturbing.
Yeah, which is why I think as important, or if not more than that, is the conceptual horror and also the
because this is not a splatter film.
No, it's definitely not, and it's all. I find it's much more difficult to wash it away from your mind as a result of that. I think. So you mentioned its themes of loneliness and its exploration of that, and the desperation and despair that seeps all the way through it.
To take themes of loneliness and grief and longing, just for all she wants throughout her whole life is her family back, like the family that was taken from her in this act of like capricious, meaningless violence.
That act is wonderfully done as well.
Sorry?
That the first act of horrific violence is wonderfully done. Like in terms of because I don't know. I think Pesh rubs up against this idea of the cliched, outsider, who's othered in some way, and he's just a bit weird, and it plays with that. But then it follows through with what you don't expect it to, and it's like, oh, okay, this is going the way that we didn't expect it to.
But to take all those themes and explore them in this way through this lens of cruelty and morbidity and ghoulishness and importantly also amorality, this is her. I like a film that we mentioned again and again, Deranged, right, from 1974. But this is a very similar film in the sense that this is a character who's just left alone, isolated, and there are no checks on their thought processes. There are no checks on their emotions or their actions, and what we're peering into here is just her normal life. There's nothing. There's a wonderful scene where someone comes home with her, and we suddenly get a kind of a glimpse into how she appears to, say, to us if we were to meet this person. It's great.
It is. It's really tense.
But it's so. I mean, there are 4 or 5 images in the film, and I don't necessarily just mean like cinematographically. I mean in terms of their dramatic content, that are among like my favorite images in any film. You know, like there's an image toward the end, which I can't describe in any detail. That is just like such an incredible crystallization of all of the themes of grief and you know, loss and longing, in an image that is just like so ghoulish. It's just like grotesque and weird, but so like overwhelmingly sad. 10 out of 10, one of my favorite films of all time.
10 out of 10. Hold on a minute, just to track back a little bit. What was your number 10 again? Remind me.
Logan.
And how many out of 10 did Logan get?
8.
Oh, okay. So, and did any films in your top 10 get a 9?
Brawl and Quiet Passion.
Okay, and then so this is your only 10, and it's in your top 10. No, sorry, your favorites of all time. However many is in that list, they would be up there. Okay, wow, and okay.
And I also I think actually you mentioned Mark Kermode. I think that he said in his review that the film kind of loses its way in the third act. I actually don't agree with that. I love the third act of this film. And I think you have this, like, we spoke on our last episode when we were talking about Happy Christmas, about the offshoot of the mumblecore genre, the mumblegore genre, which I think some people would try to situate this in, you know, where you have a kind of a quiet, almost like somnambulistic kind of film in which not a whole lot happens in traditional terms. Obviously there's a lot going on, like psychologically and thematically, but in terms of like overt action, not a huge amount happens. But it ends abruptly in a kind of a panic or a frenzy of action, and for the character, for kind of psychologically overwhelming chaos, you know, and it's a similar kind of slow burn tempo in like films like mumblegore films like The House of the Devil or The Innkeepers, and it's often a function of budget that will save the scene with lots of actors and lots of action and lots of setups and everything. We'll save that for just the end of the film because we can't afford to do it more than once or whatever. But it's an aesthetic choice that I often respond to. I really like that kind of thing, where the outside world suddenly intrudes on this kind of hermetically sealed.
Because this film is very free of social political institutions, right? As so you mentioned that the father makes a choice not to include the police in any of this,
and even the way in which it kind of floats free of history as well. It's like it's not it's kind of it's somewhere somewhen, but it's not really made precise.
Yeah. But it's never pretentious with that, because that could very easily be a choice, a storytelling choice that would turn me off, actually.
Right.
But I think this is so compellingly done and framed, and the ideas.
No, it's not. It's not like really set outside. It's not like a fairy tale or something like that. But it evokes that kind of thing. So does The Witch. Actually, it's like, you know, she's living on the edge of this forest, and it's like, you know. But you know, there's a scene where she leaves those environs and goes to somewhere else, and you can kind of start to situate it historically, based on that.
Which
kind
makes
of thing,
everything. I think that's important because it makes everything all the more horrible as well,
right.
When it brushes up against that. I mean, it's not like, you know, another film that I know you've seen is Sokharov's Mother and Son, which is obviously not a horror film, but like, you know, very, very free of that, you know, institutional fabric, to its detriment. I think that was a film that I think does have pretensions. I
like that film, but
or maybe there is a sincerity to it, but in fact, there definitely is a sincerity to it. But I'm like, it's something that I don't.
This is like Mother and Son with torture porn.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you're really selling it to the listeners. Okay.
So that's it. So we just quickly run through my top 10 again. So my number 10 was Logan. My number 9 was 20th Century Women. My number 8 was Good Time. My number 7 was 47 Meters Down. My number 6 was Silence. My number 5 was The Handmaiden. My number 4 was Blade Runner 2049. My number 3 was A Quiet Passion. My number 2 was Brawl in Cell Block 99. And my number 1 film of the year was The Eyes of My Mother.
Wow, well done, Nicholas Pesh. What should we give him, like an award? I don't know. the Habitus.
I think a 10 out of 10 is a word enough in itself.
Okay,
do you want to run down yours?
Just to go through my top 10 again, or my top 9. Manchester by the Sea by Kenneth Lonergan is at number 10. Number 9, Good Time by Josh and Benny Safdie. Number 8, Tony Erdmann by Marin Ade. I feel like we should have music running under this, like for the tension thing. Number 7, A Quiet Passion by Terence Davies. Number 6, Get Out, Jordan Peele. Number 5, The Eyes of My Mother. Number 4, Bertrand Bonello's Nocturama. Number 3, Brawl in Cell Block 99. And number 2, Blade Runner 2049, which brings us to my number 1 of 2017. It's my only film in the top 10, which is a 9 out of 10. No 10s for me, because I'm a more critical critic than you are. But my number 1 is Terrence Malick's Song to Song. There, end of the show. That's all. That's what we need. Which is a film that I've seen twice now. I saw it in the cinema halfway through this year in June. I liked it a lot. I underwent a critical reappraisal of Malick earlier this year in January, round about the same time at which I watched Manchester by the Sea, in fact, and La La Land, which I referred to very briefly and very vaguely to the emotional circumstances in which I watched those films. But let's say I was ready to reconnect with Malick. I was a big fan of his early work. I think The New World is one of the best films ever made. A total 10 out of 10 for me. Kind of allowed myself to get dragged along with the critical consensus from Tree of Life onwards, although I was very ambivalent about Knight of Cups, as I think most people were, and yet wanted to connect with them, anyway, found reason enough in my life and my critical tastes and aesthetic sensibilities to do so. So this was the first Malick film in a while for which I was excited. And I was kind of also intrigued by the fact that people really didn't respond to it. And so I watched it and I liked it. I liked it a lot. It grew on me. It stayed with me. It was kind of like by default my number 1 of the year, like after a certain point, because it was like, well, it was kind of maybe interchangeable with Blade Runner 2049. And I had the opportunity recently to rewatch it. And so I did, just to confirm its place. And boy, it shot right up in my estimations. Not only did I confirm its strengths, but I also felt it was like, wow, okay, this is really, really great. I think it's a really, really great movie. Have you seen it? It's nowhere near your top 10. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I watched it. I watched it the other night.
Okay.
I have to say, I came pretty close to hating it.
No, come on.
Seriously.
Really?
Like, it took me 3 sittings to get through it.
Oh, you bastard.
See, I'm kind of
how come? What?
I'm kind of on the same page as the most of the critics here with regard to his most recent films. I really liked The Tree of Life, and that was a critically won the Palme d'Or, was nominated for Best Picture. Yeah. That was certainly not divisive. To the Wonder, though, started this kind of, by the consensus, this kind of like downward fizzling out of his I mean, I remember The New World being a little bit divisive, but certainly, beginning with To the Wonder and then Knight of Cups. I haven't yet seen Voyage of Time, his
nor have I.
Pretty controversial documentary. But yeah, I didn't like this one at all. I thought I just found it really tedious, like really, really boring. I couldn't connect with the characters at all. I find the like the why don't you tell me what you liked about it? And
sure.
I'll tell you.
Yeah. Thank you. I was waiting for that. So Ryan Gosling again and Rooney Mara are a couple, let's say, who get involved with this music producer played by Michael Fassbender, and they meet at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, where the film is set. And to my knowledge, it was shot basically as kind of like a documentary, like with these three kind of going about, meeting the likes of Iggy Pop and
Patti Smith.
Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Yeah,
Patti
right.
Smith, Val Kilmer in like the most bizarre cameo. I joked on Twitter saying, you know, for all of his ambiguity, it's nice to see finally Malick has an authorial surrogate in his work, because Val Kilmer shows up on stage and he's cutting his hair, he's taking a chainsaw to like musical instruments. It's just really, really weird. But Rooney Mara's character, she drifts towards Fassbender, who's kind of a drunken douchebag throughout the whole film. And she has an affair with him, or at least sleeps with him. That's the setup. There is an emotional fallout to that. Kate Blanchett shows up, not as herself, as somebody else, as a fictional character.
And Natalie Portman.
Yeah, Natalie Portman. And Holly Hunter.
As Rooney Mara's mother, right? No, as Natalie Portman's mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a flux in these characters' emotions. Characters drift from and to one another's peripheries. I think this is a beautiful approximation of memory mechanisms, as I think is my contribution to the many ways in which you might describe Malick's editorial approach. The methodology invites derision, I think, because it ostensibly feels like he's just thrown this together from a great deal of material, and he could have made probably about 5 different films out of this.
Right, and on any different day, he would have edited it differently.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
And, if he was Peter Greenaway, he may have made a CD-ROM of it, in which we might even cut it together ourselves. But I've mentioned the memory mechanism thing. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful approximation of the ways in which emotions kind of have a hangover and an afterlife, and the way in which they manifest themselves imagistically, editorially, the way sounds seem to prompt other sounds and images seem to prompt other images. I mean, the easy way and the cliched way in which to describe this is associative. But by this point, we're used to the disembodied voiceover of Malick's cipher characters, although I do think Rooney Mara plays here the most complicated or complex female character that we've ever encountered in a Malick film. I think she's absolutely superb. There's a scene late on in the film in which her character, let's say, is reunited with somebody from her previous romantic arrangement.
Yeah.
And it's a second chance at a meet cute, and the way in which she embodies somebody who simultaneously is getting to grips with or coming to terms with her own agency, and also coming to terms with that rush and thrill of familiarity when a chemistry just kicks in, like that you had kind of half forgotten and you're re-remembering, and going with the flow, and in that moment, and the sun seems to shine through these characters, and as I said to you previously, either on air or off, I can't remember now, but I connect with films that are exploring fleetingness, and especially with regard to romance and those kinds of emotions, and the overlaps of emotions that kind of filter through a romance. Romance as a verb, romance as a noun, whatever else, as an emotional abstract. I connect with that, and I think this is beautifully acted. It's wonderfully put together. It looks gorgeous. It's for me, it's by far the best film of the year. Moving on.
Okay, so as you said, this film was improvised out of nothing, right? So they went to South by Southwest in I think March of 2012.
Yeah.
I think South by Southwest is in March, and then they came that they shot lots and lots of footage there of Michael Fassbender and Ryan Gosling and Rooney Mara, the same way that Night of Cups was shot, where they would just go out with Christian Bale and wander around LA and shoot him looking at the clouds and crossing the road and picking up an apple and talking to somebody, and it's an experimental technique, fine. But the problem is that, all of those scenes, there's a scene where Michael Fassbender is talking to Iggy Pop, And I was watching it thinking, like, did Iggy Pop know that he was in a feature film when this was happening? Because it just feels like, did he just think that he was chatting to Michael Fassbender? Because a lot of the time, the characters are so barely there that it's like, I'm just watching, like, documentary footage of Ryan Gosling horsing around with Rooney Mara at South by Southwest. And there's no characters. So, like, when you say that, like, you know, it approximates memory and all this kind of, like, that needs to be predicated on some kind of connection with the characters. And for me, I couldn't care less about these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get all of that, and I understand the criticism. For me, it's not a problem.
Right.
For me, the characters are there. Like Fassbender, like, he may just be playing Fassbender. By the way, Fassbender's arguably got the best 2 roles in one film this year in Alien Covenant. I thought he was very, very good.
He's
at that.
definitely.
In this, he's like, I mean, he's like playing himself, I guess.
Right.
He's shit faced for most of the film. He's like like visibly high or drunk. That makes it completely, like, that enriches it for me. It's like
the fact that he seems to be kind of playing himself.
I mean, like, no. I mean, like, I'm not interested in knowing who Michael Fassbender is.
I just think the first scene in the film, I can't remember how far into the film this is. It can't be that far because it's Natalie Portman's first appearance. But when he meets her in the cafe or in the restaurant, that was the first scene where I felt like I was actually watching a scene in a film with actors playing characters, because Natalie Portman didn't seem to just be Natalie Portman. She was a waitress who had aspirations of being a teacher. It's like, okay, well, this is a character. I know Michael Fassbender in real life is not like a record executive or whatever, but it's pretty close. I know Christian Bale in real life is not a screenwriter, but that's what he played in Knight of Cups. But it just feels like you're just watching Christian Bale wandering around LA. You know, the film is definitely pretty. I don't think it's ever like rapturously beautiful. I think it's also editorially, I think it's too restless to be really environmentally immersive. It keeps hopping around in different locations. I also have this issue with jump cuts that there's too much of it. It's too much jump cutting. And I know that that's a consequence of the way it was shot, the way that these are not really scenes that were conceived. They're cobbled together.
I mean, this is definitely a portrait of romance in the age of attention deficit, whether consciously or not. And also, I think it encapsulates that mindset of, for Mara's character at least, that notion of the grass always being greener on the other side. And so it cuts about it jumps about it. I'm a big fan of that combination of Steadicam and mid-movement cutting. So when we're cutting really with forward motions, I love it. The
camera work and the editing is a very mixed bag for me. I think there are some nice juxtapositions, and there are some it works definitely. It definitely hits the right note at times, but generally I find it to be jumbled and unappealing. I also don't like the extensive use of fisheye lenses in this as well.
And it's also used like kind of cheapish cameras in certain moments as well, because it goes very, very like digital. And you're like, whoa, okay, it takes you out a bit. I also think
that I didn't like Knight of Cups, but like this differs from Knight of Cups in the sense that we get 4 different voiceover narrations from 4 different perspectives, and I think that you could argue that one of the saving graces of Knight of Cups was that it had some sense of interiority that I don't think this has at all because of the 4 different perspectives. So this kind of impressionistic sort of like, as you say, kind of like approximation of perception or something like that, and personal memory, but it just feels... See,
that's another thing. I think on the one hand, it's an approximation of what I said. On the other hand, there's nothing tethering it to any singular narratorial viewpoint, which I find actually not necessarily a plus, but definitely a point of interest. And it's an experimentation in itself. It's another means by which Malick is exploring. Like, there's this, I don't buy this critical cliche that he's become a parody of himself, because I think all of his films are very, very different to each other, actually, in terms of what they're doing. And I mean, if he has become a parody of himself, I'm happy to be part of that parody. I mean, like, you know, it's great. I mean, wonderful.
I think the multiple as I said, I think the multiple perspectives, they kind of neutralize any sense of kind of grounded interiority, and it feels like a sort of a like an omniscient narrator, kind of like you know, drifting from point of view to point of view. And and you're kind of, what you're left with once that's neutralized is like these kind of like meaningless fragments of like an unarticulated drama where the characters have to actually verbalize things that haven't even appeared in the film. Like, for example, Rooney Mara at one point says that she revolted against goodness, thought it had deceived me, thought I could do better than others, didn't need what made life sweet for them. And I was like, did you? You know, when? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, Natalie Portman, when I was a girl, I loved everyone. You killed my love. When? Like in the film. Like, this material's not in the film, you know?
But I love that, how it's like fragments untethered from, or like fragments like a scrapbook torn from its spine. And yeah, as you said, this could be re-edited very, very differently on a different day, but it's like, this is the film he made, you know? Yeah. I don't mind it. I buy it.
Sure.
I think Mara's acting is strong enough. I love Gosling. I think their chemistry is wonderful.
I do. Rooney Mara and Natalie Portman are quite good in the film when they're given something to do other than to just like stand in front of a camera and be Rooney Mara and Natalie Portman.
Yeah. Like scenes that could be otherwise very, very cringeworthy for me, like when Mara's like dancing in the room and like, you know, kind of semi sparring with the air. I mean, like on paper that is kind of the stuff of cringe. Somehow she's pulled it off. And it's to Malik's credit that, like, you know, he gives his actors the space in which to improvise and do things. And actually, but
there's a difference between giving your actors space to do that and for the film being nothing but that space.
Well, actually, I think I'd be surprised if the method behind the film was completely free of some kind of structure. Well,
it did take 3 years to edit the film.
Yeah.
Before they shot it in 2012. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know what his film next year is going to be like.
That's going to be really interesting to see.
All in German, not like this at all.
Something that was like scripted drama. Yeah. More so probably than anything he's ever done. Certainly more so than anything he's done since Badlands. But I don't know. There's a tendency to praise this kind of material and that kind of like, okay, well, we're talking about something that supposedly happened to this character, but it's not been in the film. By talking about like elliptical storytelling as though there's like a favorite phrase of like when you're talking about like, you know, Claire Denis or someone like this, like it's elliptical. You know, but like if you want to use that literary metaphor of ellipsis, like this is the equivalent of a novel that's like 80% ellipses. You know, it's like the sentence starts and then we have half a page of ellipses and then there's a few more words and then we have 3 more pages of ellipses and then the sentence ends. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty bad novel. Like there's ellipses and then there's I also this is something that just is very personal to me that I just find it so annoying, is when people like Iggy Pop and Patti Smith show up in films. Like it reminded me of like Judd Apatow's Funny People, where it's like, oh, Eminem shows up and like, you know, I can't even remember who the rest is, a parade of like, oh, look who Judd Apatow knows. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Would you say the same thing of like, you know, Ocean's 12 and Ocean's 13 in that film?
I hated Ocean's 12. Yeah.
For that reason.
Ocean's 13 is not so bad, but Ocean's 12 with Bruce Willis showing up and stuff, yeah.
I watched not long after recently watching Song to Song again. I watched Film Socialism by Godard, in which Patti Smith again shows up. Really? She's on the Concordia cruise liner. Wow. It's it's really strange that she's in both films, kind of just like playing herself and mucking around, and you know. But I think, you know, Patti Smith has the one best line in this film. When she says to Rooney Mara, she looks at Ryan Gosling and she says, "Fight for him," you know. And it just sinks. It sinks in for me. It sinks my heart. It's
ricochets off me.
I love the you know, multifariousness of the multiple emotions that one can feel in life simultaneously. You know.
For me, like, I mean, the actual experience of watching the film was just like tedium, punctuated by like it's the moments where the editing or the camera work clicked. And, you know, moments of like, you know, hinting at like some sort of nascent potential in the scenario that is never fulfilled. Yeah.
See, I'm
Oh, well.
like tending towards even interpreting that as like part of the fabric, which is why I think, the methodology isn't a gimmick. It's actually it informs very, very deeply.
No, I don't think it's a gimmick at all. I just
yeah.
I mean, I'm anticipating his return to scripted drama though.
Yeah, okay.
Enough already with this.
Okay, well,
this trilogy,
we got
trilogy, he did it. It's done now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, we got 20 films into the top 10 and to get into the divisive one, which is good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my number one, Song to Song.
Okay, cool. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to run down a list of 10 films that we saw for the first time this year that are not from this year. So the 10 best new to us, or individually new to me. Sorry?
Yeah. No. I'm just laughing here to myself because I never really know how to phrase that. Some people say new to me. I say like first time viewings. Some people might say repertory stuff, like retrospective.
Repertory. That's like the cinema though, isn't it? That's anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna very quickly we're not gonna spend a lot of time on this. I'm just gonna run down.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna do them. I think you've ranked yours.
I ranked mine.
Right?
Yeah, because I'm a ranker. Yeah, it's
okay.
Right. Yeah, I ranked.
I haven't ranked these. These are just in order of release. Okay, so these are all films that I saw for the first time in 2017.
Okay.
The first one is I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, directed by Mervyn LeRoy, 1932. Have you seen that one?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great film. Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of the Warner Brothers social issue movies. That they were known for in the 30s. It's fantastic, and it's like 90 minutes and like breakneck pace. It covers the course of like I can't remember exactly how long, but it's years and years and years in this guy's life and all the misfortunes that befall him and all the misadventures that he gets into, and the final scene, the famous final scene, receding into the darkness.
Yeah. No, there's a lot that contemporary filmmakers could learn from in terms of storytelling economy. From watching those kinds of films, and that one in particular.
I thought it was great. The next one is The Ox-Bow Incident, directed by William A. Wellman in 1943. It's a Western, and it's about an unjust hanging that's carried out by a lynch mob, that within the mob there are different individuals with different kind of perspectives, and some people who are a little bit more measured in their perspective, and people calling for due process, people like, poking holes in the assumptions that other people are making about how these people must be the guilty party. And it's just this really like riveting moral drama, that I kind of didn't expect it to go the direction that it goes. Probably just like a prejudice on my part toward films made like Code era films. Although part of that is that, immoral actions have to have consequences, and that plays into it. But still, it goes to a very, very dark place, and I thought it was excellent. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, next one is The Beguiled, the original, by Don Siegel, 1971.
I've seen neither The Beguiled, the original, nor the Sofia Coppola remake.
Right, I saw the adaptation. I saw the remake this year, which is pretty good, but removes, for some reason, I don't know. I mean, if I was more uncharitable, I'd say it was that she chickened out. She removes the black slave character, which removes all of the racism from the film. She removes a lot of the kind of the overtones of pedophilia, and it's like the original film is like is one of those films that I love that like wades into really kind of like sensitive, taboo, kind of stigmatized kind of social themes, and then kind of like stomps around.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue, and I haven't seen either film, but you could argue that like Coppola's decision is in itself like racist, in kind of like diluting the racial element.
I mean, she's within her rights to shift the focus thematically in any direction she wants. There's a whole lot. there's a whole lot going on in that movie as well. That's perfectly fine. But I did. It's very noticeable that character is missing, and therefore that entire thematic angle, because there's a power relationship between the Clint Eastwood character and the women in the school, but then there's a further power relationship between the white women and the black woman, and so on. In relation to like the Confederacy and the North. I thought this was like a beautifully filmed film. This was so, like, I've seen other Don Siegel films. I've seen Dirty Harry. I've seen Escape from Alcatraz. I've seen, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and like these other kind of like, pretty like robust masculine movies. And this is very atypical based on what else I've seen by him. It's my favorite film by him. Probably my favorite Clint Eastwood performance ever. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it, and the remake doesn't really hold a candle to it. Didn't like Colin Farrell's performance as much as Clint Eastwood's, but anyway. So moving on to the next one, the film that I mention on every episode, Deranged.
You've mentioned it on this episode as well already.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Jeez.
it just comes up,
Not only on every episode, every segment of every episode.
Yeah. I think I mentioned it on 2 episodes of the last episode as well.
Probably, yeah, you did. It probably show up again on your most anticipated of 2018.
Yeah, the remake somehow. In 2018. Yeah. This is a thinly fictionalized dramatization of the life of Ed Gein, starring Roberts Blossom, who's best known to our generation probably as Old Man Marley, the shovel slayer from Home Alone.
Yeah.
He's playing a man named Ezra Cobb, who's referred to as Ez. So it's like, Ed and Ez. It pretty much beat for beat follows the story of the true story of Ed Gein. Even though at the end there's a disclaimer saying any similarity based on, like, it's purely coincidental. I absolutely love this movie's images in this. It was released 8 months before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974. Sorry, directed by Jeff Gillen and Alan Ormsby, who'd never really made anything else. 8 months before and obviously the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is inspired by Ed Gein as well, so there is imagery in Deranged that lines up very closely with imagery in Texas Chainsaw, except that Deranged is a character study of, if you imagine if the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a character study of Leatherface, instead of the protagonists being the victims. This is a dark character study, which is why I mentioned it in relation to The Eyes of My Mother. Again, imagery that stayed with me. This is a very kind of rough, shaggy kind of film, low budget. The first half of the film is framed as a kind of a dramatic reconstruction with a narrator who steps into frame and talks about what's going on in the background, almost like unsolved mysteries kind of thing. Right. I loved it. It stuck with me all year. I can't wait to watch it again. Okay.
Do you want 3 of mine?
That was my 4th, so I'll do a 5th, and then we'll hear 5 of yours.
Okay.
So my 5th is from 1990. It's Frankenhooker by Frank Henenlotter, which is a dark comedy about a guy whose fiance is killed in a lawnmower accident, and he is like an aspiring medical student who manages to build her a new body. All that remains is her head, and he builds her a new body from the bodies of prostitutes. And it's like the whole thing. It's like it's effectively a kind of like a ridiculous kind of splatter film, but what makes it so funny is the performance of the lead actor James Lorenz playing Jeffrey, who constantly like mutters to himself under his breath. This really kind of like what would be the best way to put it? Kind of like a detached kind of detached, incongruous kind of reaction to what he's doing. Certainly one of the funniest films I saw this year, and it's again another one of those things where it gets right in there into the kind of icky thematic areas and carries a lot of weight as well. I thought it was great. So
so I know that I feel like I've led you here under false pretenses, because I told you that I'd ranked my new to me old films, and I did, and I have, although I'm going to proceed through them like you did in the order in which they were released. I don't know why, it just feels wrong to rank apples against oranges when they're so old.
Okay.
So first up we have The River by Jean Renoir, which came out in 1951, which I saw earlier this year on one of my very few trips to London this year, the BFI on the South Bank. I saw it on 35mm, which always seems to inform my connection to a film, seems to allow a deeper connection, I guess. There's many ways in which to sort of interpret and summarize this film. It was filmed in India. It's a coming of age tale, and to my knowledge, I think it's a dramatization of a novel by Rumer Godden. That's it. And it's very good. I recommend it.
Okay.
Nah, it's about upper middle class English family. And sisters, I think there's 5 of them, and it's about their interrelations, and it's about the relationships to different visitors and the friendships that form over times and the romances. To be honest, I can't really remember that much about it. I just remember really, really liking it.
Okay.
But anyway, moving on, I also loved this year, The Sweet Smell of Success, which I actually saw by Alexander McKendrick in 1957. I saw this the same evening that I saw The River, but it was on DCP, sadly. And obviously, I mean, it's been on my radar for years. I did have a recording of it on television at one point, on VHS, blank VHS, and I never got around to watching it. And I'm kind of pleased that I didn't, because it's I mean, like most films, you kind of need to see it on as good a format as possible. And I loved it. I loved its intrigues and its tensions and the emotional maturity and clarity with which it delineates its emotional fluxes. The on-screen performances are great. By Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis. Burt Lancaster actually was the star of an honourable mention, if I may have one. I know we didn't give you one, but if I may have an honourable mention in terms of my new-to-me films, it would have been Frank Perry's The Swimmer from 1968. Have you seen that? In which Burt Lancaster plays a guy who swims home in his through his neighbour's swimming pools and mentally disintegrates as he does so. Okay, and then the third on my new-to-me list would be the Czechoslovakian film Closely Observed Trains by Yuri Menzel from 1966. Have you seen this one?
A couple of these, The River and Closely Observed Trains, are like, the canonical great films that appear on, every year I download They Shoot Pictures top 1,000 films list. Yeah. And it's always one of the, whereas I've got, Frankenhooker and Deranged and, other trashter pieces.
I'm trying to look ahead now. Have I got any of those kinds of choices? Maybe. You know what? In fact, 2 of my choices, they're not trashy by any means, but they're only on my list because you asked me to watch them. So you're to blame for my trashier choices. 4th on my list would be, in fact, Angst by Gerald Cargill. 1983. Which
that's highbrow trash.
Episode 2. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a great film. And then 5th, again, we watched it for the purposes of covering it on here, would be Near Dark by Catherine Bigelow, which I hadn't seen, which I actually want to watch again.
We talked about Angst on episode 2, and we talked about Near Dark on episode 4. So,
it's both of which are great. And if you haven't, if you don't know anything about them or want to know what we say about them, then listen to our previous episodes, as Bobby just directed you to there. So that's 5 of my 10.
5, okay. So give me the next 5 of yours. My next one is from 1995. It's the anthology horror Tales from the Hood, directed by Rusty Kundiev, and I believe produced by Spike Lee. Better than any film by Spike Lee that I've seen. This is 4 shorts, all directed by Kundiev. Each one dealing with a different kind of social issue in the black community. So you have one dealing with police brutality, you have another dealing with gang violence, you have another dealing with the legacy of slavery, and you have another dealing with familial dysfunction and domestic violence. And each one treats it through the lens of a different kind of horror trope. You have, I won't get into exactly what they do with each one, but unlike most horror anthologies, there's no real weak spot here. Each one is excellent in its own right. And the thematic cohesion provided by the topicality of the 4 shorts really binds it together and gives it a sort of a sense of wholeness that these films rarely have. Even when the films are all directed by the same director, even something like Creepshow or like Jim Jarmusch's Night on Earth or whatever, I don't think those films hang together as well as this one does.
Well, I mean, we mentioned certain women previously
Yeah, sure,
in this
exactly.
episode.
Yeah.
Can you think of another anthology film that is as evenly high quality as this one that you've seen?
No, not offhand.
No,
it's one of the best
Okay.
horror anthologies I've seen.
Okay.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay, so of the 6 you've listed so far, that's the one that I'm going to note down. I mean, that's the one I most want to see.
Not Deranged.
No, not Deranged. I feel like I've seen Deranged
feel like
several
you've seen it,
times
okay,
by now. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Okay. All right. So my next, I'm going to do two for one here because they're by the same directors. These are two films by the Dardenne brothers. 2002's The Son and 2005's Palme d'Or winning The Child.
Right.
I first heard, I believe, of the Dardenne brothers in 2005 when they won the Palme d'Or, and it was one of the films that I kind of never got around to watching that year. And looking into their previous films and reading up on them, I kind of wasn't that drawn to them. I thought they were kind of like, they kind of struck me as like almost like a Franco-Belgian Ken Loach equivalent, something like that, which is not, at the time, I hadn't seen many Ken Loach films either, so
yeah.
Because
Ken Loach sounded like an English Dardenne brother.
Yeah. I figured that it was, kitchen sink social realist issues based kind of filmmaking with, it wasn't really my kind of thing at that time, and still, if, relatively speaking, isn't, even though I'd be more open to it now. And I skipped Lorna's Silence. The first film by them that I saw was The Kid with a Bike, which I thought was good, but, didn't knock me out. But then I saw 2 Days, One Night, which was my second favorite film of 2014. I thought it was incredible. I thought what they did there, they had a really simple kind of dramatic scenario within which they find this also really simple but difficult moral dilemma, and then they structure a kind of an incredibly low-key ticking clock thriller around that. Like I couldn't believe how tense and riveting the film was. Similarly, they do the same kind of thing with The Son, where this man is like following this teenager and you don't know why, and it's this like unbearably tense, fascinating mystery. And The Child has their equivalent basically like of a car chase, but it's done on this incredibly like muted level. It's like they're taking these elements that you would see in genre films and totally transforming them through the prism of their own sensibilities and creating things that are just as exciting, but in according to their own kind of like aesthetic values. Still have a couple of their films to see. Still haven't seen The Promise or Lorna's Silence, but two Days, One Night, and their other Palme d'Or winner, Rosetta. Like Rosetta's one of the best films I've ever seen. So I'm a huge fan of theirs now.
Okay, that's good.
But these two I saw this year.
So sorry, are you telling me about these two films as one of your slots, or
no? They're two slots.
Okay, good.
Okay, so
because I also have two films by the same director, but they're across two different slots. Okay.
All right. Okay, so I've got two. That was 2002 and 2005. So I've got one more horror film, another entry in the mumble gore subgenre by I think his breakout movie, Adam Wingard, A Horrible Way to Die, from 2010. I think it was the first film that kind of got him a lot of kind of indie recognition, and then his next film, You're Next, was the film that got him some mainstream traction.
Which one is our friend Joe Swanberg in?
This one.
Okay.
A Horrible Way to Die.
One.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is about a woman who is... It's kind of two storylines going on at the same time. It's about a woman whose ex-boyfriend was, unbeknownst to her, a serial killer. And he's now gone to prison, and she has PTSD from her time spent with him. Meanwhile, he has escaped from prison. Has he escaped or been released? I can't remember. But anyway, he's out of prison, and we have these two storylines where he's kind of like trying to find her. She's now living under an assumed name. She's attending like group therapy sessions. The film is shot in this really kind of dreamlike manner that kind of grated on me initially, and not only initially, but I kind of ran hot and cold on it because it really does stick to its it sets up a particular kind of approach to form, and it doesn't deviate from it. And I don't know, but like by about halfway through, I was kind of on board with it, and then it did something at the end that I found it incredibly jarring and off-putting. And then afterwards I was thinking back on it and thinking, wait a minute, I kind of loved it. So it was a film that kind of threw me back and forth, and when it kind of spat me out at the end, I didn't know what to make of it, and eventually, but it stuck with me, and initially when I put it into my Adam Wingard rankings, initially I put it in quite low, and then it started to, I think it's probably his second best film after You're Next. I thought it was great. It has a terrible reputation. It has like average rating of like 4.3 out of 10 on IMDb or something like that. But anyway, all right. So my last one is a film that I know you liked, as Short Term 12 by Destin Cretton from 2013, which I just thought was like really moving and beautiful and humane. So it's set at a halfway house for troubled youths. Deals with like themes of sexual abuse and again like PTSD and things like that. Brie Larson's breakout performance, I guess. Yeah,
it is. It's weird one this because it does everything on paper that I would ordinarily run a mile from. And I watched it at the Locarno Film Festival in a giant cinema venue there, which is almost like a converted sports hall. There was a standing ovation throughout the final credits, which I'd never encountered before. And I was there standing up with everyone else clapping. And right. I was with a few friends who I'd just met there. And they'd arranged to do something after the screening. And I actually had arranged to do something else anyway, but there was an opportunity for me to kind of accompany them on the walk away from the cinema. And I had to excuse myself, and I just went into a very quiet street and just cried. And that was like my emotional response to the film. I found it extremely moving. Haven't seen it since. Haven't really felt the need to watch it since, for whatever reason. But I did. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And it's also a film I wouldn't have expected to hear on your list either, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
Because it has a soul. It has an emotional. Is that your 10 then?
That was my 10th, yeah.
If you could pick one from the 10, what one would you pick? What was the best film that you saw this year for the first time, which was old?
I would say it would be a toss-up between Deranged and The Beguiled.
Wow, I can't believe another film even got a look in with Deranged.
I feel like I undersold The Beguiled there in my summary of it. It's I didn't even say what it's about. It's about a wounded Union soldier who's taken in the South into a mostly empty girls' boarding school, with most of the inhabitants having gone because of the proximity of the war. And he initially, the intention is for them to turn him over to the Confederate soldiers who pass by periodically. They're going to tend to his wounds first, and in trying to forestall that eventuality, he one by one starts to seduce all of the women of the different ages, and in the original, in this version, obviously also of different ethnicities and different kind of positions of power. And there's just so much to chew on in there. It's a great film.
Okay, well, I'll get to that. I mean, wow,
if I have to pick one, I'm going to give it to Deranged.
Okay, I mean, you kind of have to.
I have to. Come on.
If it allows you to mention it one last time and then clean slate in 2018 where we don't mention it anymore, and I'm all for that. Okay, so my the second half of my 10 list would be, next up would be Alan Clark's 1987 TV film. Am I allowed one of those? Sure. Road.
Okay. The only Alan Clark film I've seen is Elephant, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I mean, it has the same steady, calm, bound kinetic energy as Elephant. There's a weirdness to it, a lot more dialogue than Elephant. But it's filmed in Easington, an old colliery town in the northeast, otherwise, or better known for its being the backdrop of Billy Elliot, a much more commercial film, a very, very different beast. Road is about a number of disparate characters that live in this community that are kind of preparing to go out on the town. and other things besides. And it's emotionally rich. It does many different things. It's not afraid to confront the harsh reality and brutal undercurrents of this life, and yet it's also extremely funny and a little bit bonkers as well in the way that Clarke's films were able to be.
You made a remake of this film, didn't you?
I made a remake of this film in 2006 in which I stripped away all of its content and
kept only the title.
Yeah, an award-winning film, honestly. And then next up we have Daughters of the Dust by Julie Dash, which was released in 1991, which underwent a critical commercial reappraisal last year when it was re-released by the BFI. So it's a difficult film to summarise in terms of its plot because it operates very much in a kind of an abstract vein. I don't want to say elliptical after your dig against that term in relation to song. But it's set in 1902 off the South Carolina coast across an intergenerational, 3 generations of one family. Of like Gula women, I think I pronounced that right, on St. Helena Island, and they're preparing to migrate to mainland America. Okay. And so it's set at a very, very pivotal historical moment for this family in particular. And Dash's approach to it is, I mean, it's so like, on the one hand, so direct and imagistic. And on the other, like, so it's got a beautiful free spirit to it. Like, again, I don't want to say elliptical, but I think,
there's a legitimate application of that.
There is.
Yeah.
I mean,
this is often used as an excuse when
No, it's true. No, the characters are, this material is much more grounded in, socio-historical reality. It's a really, really beautiful film. I saw it at Cinema Rediscovered in Bristol when I went to that weekend-long festival, repertory festival in the UK in June. And it was my find of that weekend, I guess. Although I did also see Sidney J. Fury's The Entity, which I really thought was really great, which sadly missed out on the 10, but I'm going to take liberties and mention it anyway.
Another honourable mention.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Next up, we would have Howard's End, which I also saw in Bristol by James Ivory, the 1992 film. Have you seen this?
No.
It's really, really great, honestly. Emma Thompson, the acting, Anthony Hopkins, it's absolutely phenomenal in a way that I really wasn't expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be this like stilted prestige drama, and in many ways, Merchant Ivory, set the
they kind of
paved the way, and if not set the template, definitely made it a respectable.
They're kind of synonymous with that,
respectable genre, right? And so I went into it thinking it was going to be this kind of slow, class-based British film. And of course it is, but it's sweeping. There's a directness to it. There's an emotional complexity to it, and the acting is across the board phenomenal. And then my final 2 films would be by the same director, Angela Schanelek, who is commonly, if reductively, referred to in relation to the Berlin School, which is itself a contentious term, which is a group of filmmakers that came from Germany, primarily Berlin, surprise, surprise, at the turn of this century, including Christoph Hochhausler and Christian Petzold, whose films you may be familiar with. Schanelek's films I wasn't familiar with at all, largely because her films aren't distributed at all in the UK. They're not talked about critically in the UK. She's not really well known in general. I mean, she's well known. She's not very well seen. And there was a retrospective of her feature films at FITUNAM in Mexico City in February when I went there. And I went along only because I hadn't seen any of her films before. I didn't know what to expect, and I was absolutely knocked out by Passing Summer.
Are these feature films?
Yeah, feature films.
Okay.
Yeah, I was knocked out by Passing Summer, which she made in 2001, in which, and this is the IMDb one-line synopsis, a woman faces a variety of emotional crises as she spends the summer interacting in various ways with friends, family, and lovers. So a little bit like, I guess, in material, to Joanna Hogg's work.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think that's maybe the most pertinent recent comparison. It's one of those films in which like characters act in certain ways that where you think, why is that the case? And then it gathers its own energy and its own emotional logic, and again it's very elliptical, but it all kind of comes together, and I was really, really knocked out by that. And then further on in the same festival, in the same retrospective, I watched Marseille, which again, a very different film. She made it in 2004, similar in style, very elliptical, although, and it's what we might also call like austere filmmaking because of the she's composed. It's got, tripod fixed framing. There's a composition, there's a consideration towards composition there. Like film characters or actors are often shot in long shot or medium shot. Very, very little to do with, the kinetic energy, for instance, with which I described the Alan Clark film. But I really, really want to see Shana Lake's other work. I mean, I saw a couple of others as part of that retrospective. As I said, she's not well known here. She's not in any way commercially received, and it's a real shame because I think it's a filmmaker who is, we need to discover and we need more of.
So of those 10, what would you pick if you had to pick a best?
Mine would be, so as I said, I'd rank them from 1 to 10, and at number 1 was Passing Summer.
Okay. Which
was also, Marseille was the most recent film of that bunch, which was 2004, but 2001 was Passing Summer. It's a great film.
All right.
Okay, so final segment of this 2017 wrap-up looks ahead to the next year, 2018, and here we're going to have give each other 10 films that we're looking forward to. I'm presuming there's going to be an overlap.
Right. Okay. Well, so the way that you were saying that you don't generally do this. You don't generally.
I don't. I mean, yeah. No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I always do, and my thought process is like, if I could only see 10 2018 titles in 2018, and I had to wait like 5 years to see everything else, what would I pick? So the films that
wow, that's super hard though.
Yeah, it's a little masochistic.
Yeah. Okay.
So well, okay, but so is it?
I'm going to give you. Can I give you 5 of mine?
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as I said, there'll probably be an overlap, I'm guessing. But obvious choice for me, like number 1, I haven't ranked them, but like first of all, the first one that comes to mind is Phantom Thread, the Paul Thomas Anderson's movie, which has obviously been seen by a lot of people who are in a position to see it in America and the UK already.
Definitely interested.
And it's getting a lot of buzz. I've seen the trailer. I don't normally watch trailers, but I watched the trailer and I didn't watch the trailer. That looks weird and unusual enough that Paul Thomas Anderson could really make a great, cracking film of it. Okay. I didn't really connect with The Master in the way that I wanted to.
I liked The Master, and I didn't really connect with Inherent Vice.
I'm the other way. Well, actually, the reason why I want to rewatch The Master is because I didn't like Inherent Vice either on first viewing, and then I watched it again after the critical dust had settled, and I thought it was great. I loved it, and I haven't been able to watch The Master. Have I got Master? No, I don't think I bought it. I'd really like to watch it again before I watch Phantom Thread. I was a big fan of There Will Be Blood, as you know.
That's actually not on my list, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Second up would be Isle of Dogs, the Wes Anderson movie, which I will very excitedly be watching as part of the Berlin Film Festival because it's the opening film there, and I'm going there. Really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah. What did you think of Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Yeah, I think it's his best film.
Oh, do you? I think I actually rank it quite low among his films.
Oh, really?
I'm a big Wes Anderson fan, but for me, like, this is coming out in March, I think, here.
Yeah.
So that's 4 years to the month since the Grand Budapest Hotel opened, I think. Which is the longest gap that he's ever had in his career. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's strange.
I'm hoping that his next live action film comes, hot on the heels of this one because
Yeah.
I think The Grand Budapest Hotel is the best film that he's ever made. It was one of my favorite films of that year. But yeah, I'm looking forward to. I love stop motion animation. I love Wes Anderson, so yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. However, it did not make my list.
Okay. Beats Per Minute would be another one for me. Robin Campio's film, which on the strength of Eastern Boys, which I really, really liked from a few years back, this has been getting even more critical buzz than that film got. I reviewed that film, thought it was very strong. This one sounds in similar vein, to be honest, so I really want to see that.
Right. I don't really know anything about. I've heard of the film, but I don't know the filmmaker. I haven't seen any of his previous work. A lot of my list is based on having liked the filmmaker's previous work and finding the premise of the new film appealing. That's kind of the two factors. Yeah. Okay.
Mine too. The next one would be this is a perverse one. Journeyman by Paddy Considine. And I'm choosing this not on the strength of the previous film because I really didn't like Tyrannosaur.
Yeah, I thought Tyrannosaur was kind of okay, but yeah.
And I didn't like his Short Dog altogether, on which that was based either. This one, it's kind of similar subject matter to what like Shane Meadows might have been attracted to. Considine was one of my favorite actors when he was working with Meadows. I'm intrigued by it. I want to see it.
Okay.
And then
what's the premise of it?
It's about a boxer, I believe. No, that's all I know.
All right. Sorry. Yeah.
You always look at premises more than I do. And then the fifth one will probably be Zvyagintsev Loveless, which comes out here on the 9th of February. And that's, again, on the strength of me being a big fan of his previous work. I loved Elena. I think the return's very strong also. And I seem to like Leviathan more than Close Friends did.
I didn't like Leviathan at all.
Really?
I thought Elena was excellent. I liked The Return, but I mean, I saw that in like 2005 or something, so I'd have to go back and watch it again. And I actually didn't ever get around to The Banishment. But Elena I thought was excellent.
Yeah, Banishment's a bit of a slow burn, but
it was one of those ones that, it was his second film. The Return had been so critically acclaimed. The Banishment came out, and then it kind of got such a tepid reaction that it barely got distributed. Yeah,
it's true. So that's my first five.
That's your first five. Okay, so all right, so I'll give you five. I'll give you five of mine, just in alphabetical order. As I said earlier, there are actually two films on this list that were on my most anticipated list of 2017 in anticipation that they would, come out that year, but they didn't. So the first and one of those films is Annihilation, written and directed by Alex Garland. I'm a big fan of Alex Garland generally. I think the two films that he made with Danny Boyle, both of them have third act issues, but are among Boyle's better films, 28 Days Later and Sunshine. But the two films that he wrote after that, Never Let Me Go, which was directed by Mark Romanek and horribly mismarketed as like a Valentine's Day film.
Not the best film to take a date to.
Yeah, incredibly depressing film, but brilliant. And then the best film that he had been associated with up to that point, which was Dread. Did you see Dread?
No, I didn't know. No,
I think you would love Dread.
Oh,
with Carl Urban.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I was envisaging Dread, Dread, because
okay. But did you see Dread?
I thought you were referring to a film that like a horror, like some horror film.
No.
Dread, as in like dreadful. No, I liked Dread a lot. Peter Travis. Yeah.
But there was also some talk that maybe Alex Garland had a hand in that directorially as well. Right. Uncredited.
No, I liked it. Yeah.
I thought that was a movie that I liked when I saw it, and then returned to it again and again, and I just think it's fantastic. One of the best action films of the past 10 years. His directorial debut, though, Ex Machina, was one of my favorite films of 2015.
I didn't see it, but I didn't hear good things.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Easily one of the best films of that year. So I'm really excited for Annihilation. Annihilation is about an expedition made up of 4 women it's based on a novel by a writer named Jeff Vandermeer, the first installment in his Southern Reach trilogy. It's about a group of scientists who go on an expedition into a mysterious zone where the laws of nature don't seem to apply. In the novel, the women are all referred to by their professions, so they're the biologist, the psychologist, the cartographer, or whatever. Natalie Portman plays the biologist, and Oscar Isaac plays her husband, who was part of the previous expedition, who's disappeared in this place. They had test screenings of this film in the summer, and it got really, really bad responses. And it's produced by Scott Rudin, who has this, this pedigree working with like David Fincher and the Coen brothers and stuff. Scott Rudin has Final Cut. It's co-produced by David Ellison, who is the CEO of Skydance Productions, who wants to change the film. He wants to recut it. He says that it's too intellectual, it's too confusing, and that the ending is too depressing. He wants a happy ending. But Scott Rudin is standing by Alex Garland and protecting his version of the film. And as a result, the film has been dropped by Paramount internationally, sold to Netflix. So the Paramount are only going to distribute it in North America now, so it's going to actually debut on Netflix here in mid-March, but it will be Alex Garland's cut of the film. Which is disappointing. Okay, but still, definitely still one of my most anticipated films of next year. Okay, next one is I said that S. Craig Zahler had one of my favorite films of 2015, and then that same film again was one of my favorite films of 2016. His second film, Brawl in Cell Block 99, we've just talked about. One of our favorite films of 2017. And he has another film next year called Dragged Across Concrete, another great title. This one is about two policemen.
What that's about.
This one is about two policemen, one played by Mel Gibson, one played by Vince Vaughn, who are partners, and they are a video of their strong arm tactics makes its way into the media, and they get suspended and they get sort of drawn into criminal activity. You just imagine what he's going to do with this. I'm excited just purely on the basis of Zahler, and yet another kind of like what a fantastic title alone.
Yeah. It sounds great. Great.
We're gonna get a Mel Gibson performance, as transformative as the Vince Vaughn performance that we got in Brawl in Cell Block 99. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. The next one is Halloween. Okay, so this is the 11th installment in the Halloween series. Written and directed by David Gordon Green. Who's probably best known these days for directing like the Seth Rogen stoner comedies. I know him best from George Washington, those indie films that were compared. He was like touted as like the heir to Terrence Malick in the early 2000s. This is co-written by Green and Danny McBride. And very little is known about it, but it's so intriguing because so when Blumhouse got the rights to the Halloween series and announced that they were going to do a sequel that would ignore all of the previous sequels, a lot of like wish lists of directors were put out, like the people who should direct the next Halloween film, and they were kind of like the pretty, they were like the usual suspects. They were kind of obvious choices. So there were people like David Robert Mitchell, who had directed It Follows, Mike Flanagan, who directed Oculus, and like Adam Wingard, who had directed You're Next and The Guest, like, established genre directors. And I kind of thought, okay, well, those are all fine choices. And then it was announced that David Gordon Green was going to do it, and he was going to co-write it with Danny McBride, which is just like such a left field choice. These two guys who have never made a horror film, even though David Gordon Green did work on a remake of Suspiria for the Weinstein Company for a long time, until Harvey Weinstein decided that Americans don't want to see Suspiria and sold the rights. That actually, we'll talk about that a little later. But my initial thought was, okay, they're ignoring all the sequels. I thought they were going to set it in the 80s and it was going to just pick up after Halloween 2. But then they announced that Jamie Lee Curtis was coming back, which obviously that means that they can't set it in the 80s. And I thought, okay, well, that means that they're going to pick up after Halloween 2. Doesn't that just make this a remake of H2O, where she's been in hiding for 40 years and Michael Myers is coming after her?
Yeah.
But then they announced that they're actually ignoring Halloween 2, which means that Laurie Strode is no longer Michael Myers' sister, which is, information that we learned in the second film. So what is her connection to Michael? Like, I have no idea what they're plans are with this material now, and it's such an odd sort of concoction of like director and material and you know, potential premise that I can't wait to see it. Okay, next one is Hold the Dark, directed by Jeremy Saulnier. Did you see either of his more recent films?
I loved Blue Ruin, but I didn't see Green Room.
I loved Blue Ruin and Green Room are both so amazing. This one is a Netflix original, so it'll be premiering on Netflix. And it's about an expert hunter who's called in to track a pack of wolves who take a child from a village. And the father of the child is following him, and the summary says it becomes unclear who's really being hunted, and like just purely based on the strength of Blue Ruin and Green Room, and that kind of like, you know, like wilderness survival sort of elemental sort of premise. Can't wait to see that. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I really, really want to see Green Room.
I think you'd love Green Room. Okay, now in the fifth one here is a film that was just announced quite recently, but I think it's already wrapped principal photography, is In Fabric by Peter Strickland, director of, you know, Barbarian Sound Studio and one of my favorite films of 2015, The Duke of Burgundy. This one, it's set against the backdrop of a busy winter sales period in a department store, and it follows a cursed dress as it passes from person to person with devastating consequences. Now, imagining that scenario rendered in the like exacting visual style of something like Barbarian Sound Studio and The Duke of Burgundy.
Yeah, it sounds...
Cannot wait. It's so unique. It's just like, even just reading the premise, you're just kind of going... I mean, it sounds like it's an anthology.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like that Robert Altman thing, The Gun, where we watch when we proceed through many different characters who inherit an object. In the case of that film or series, a gun. Right,
yeah.
A dress.
Well, there are a few different films like that. There's a film from the early 90s, like one of those, early kind of like indie Renaissance kind of films, 20 Books. Which is a $20 bill that's passed from person to person. And there's an older film called Tales from Manhattan, which follows a rented tuxedo from person to person, but these aren't horror films. So the idea that the object is cursed.
Yeah. That sounds good. I can imagine that when it comes out, Sight and Sound has the headline in the cover feature about it called Phantom Thread. That'll be the headline. Phantom Threads or something.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so that's my first five. Let's hear your second half of your list.
Okay, so let's think. Okay, so I really want to see Boots Riley's "Sorry to Bother You."
Oh yeah, that's been in the works for a long time. Yeah.
Which obviously
because
was
the album,
the title of the Coup album.
Yeah, in 2012, which was supposed to double as the soundtrack to the film, and it's just taken this long to get it off the ground. Yeah.
And he's been talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
In an alternate present-day version of Oakland, so reads the letterboxd page, black telemarketer Cassius Green discovers a magical key to professional success, which propels him into a macabre universe. I mean, that's sounds really great, like Afro-futuristic. Really
it's
good.
Premiering at Sundance. It's finally finished. Yeah, I actually for a long time didn't think that film was ever going to happen, because, like, as I said, it's like 5 years ago since the purported soundtrack to the film was released, you know. But actually, the Coup are working on another album that is also going to double as a soundtrack to the film. So, he did that as part of like the Sundance Directors Lab thing. He was working. Yeah. I'm excited for that too.
My next one, I'm listening it because of the not on the strength of the director alone, which I'm running increasingly cold on, but it's Peter Greenaway's Walking to Paris.
Okay.
And I've chosen this because of the subject matter. So it's 27-year-old Romanian sculptor, I'm quoting Letterboxd, Constantin Brancusi, walked from Romania to Paris in 1903 and 1904 as a preparation prelude to becoming the most important sculptor of the 20th century. I know nothing about this guy's life, but he lived in a small village south of the Carpathian Mountains, and he goes through Romania, Hungary, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and arrives in Paris. It sounds really, really great.
When I hear Carpathian Mountains, I just think Dracula. It's just like indelibly connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, that film, I'm not sure whether that'll make it out or, like, see, the thing is, it's one of those films that the director of Taxidermia, what's his name? Polfi?
Yeah, no,
Georgi Polfi. Right, isn't it?
Yeah, Georgi Polfi, yeah.
He has a similar kind of film called Forever that's just been in, it's in post-production, but, and Greenaway's film, like, this shot in, like, 2015. You know, and it's still in post-production.
I saw Eisenstein and Guanajuato in Berlin 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it was the same year Night of Cups was in competition.
Right. This was shot shortly after that. But it's been sitting in post-production. I don't know what the hold-up is, if they ran out of funding or why it's taking so long, because there's been very few updates. If you go on Peter Greenaway's, like, social media, he doesn't talk about it. It's not like he's actively working on it, so I don't know. But yeah.
I know that I hear through friends, etc., that he's been at a few film festivals this year, and I know that he was speaking to some people on a conversational level, over wine and dinner, and kind of looking for work. Not looking for work, looking for funding, possible funding routes. And I don't know if it was regarding this film. I suspect not. I suspect heavily not, actually.
Yeah, okay.
But
yeah, I mean, it's rare enough that a film runs out of funding in post production, and it's like it's got to get released at some point.
Okay, so my next one, very obvious choice, is The Square, which we mentioned earlier, which won the Palme d'Or. Ruben Östlund. I'm one of the few people who hasn't seen it out of my circle of colleagues. I liked Östlund's Force Majeure.
Didn't see it.
Or Tourist, as it was known to begin with.
That's the one about the avalanche, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's about a couple. It's a family unit falling apart due to what the wife perceives to be an act of cowardice on her husband's part when the avalanche comes. And it was a little over long and a little over busy for me, but you could see the Östlund touch.
It's like that. Is it like that episode of Seinfeld where George pushes everybody down to get out of the burning kitchen?
Yeah, but it's 5 times as long and not as funny. But I really liked his Involuntary, the film he made in 2005, which I thought was really, really sharp. So there's that. Now, the next one we'll be watching, I guess, next week, as early as that, should we wish to.
Jumanji.
All the money in the world.
Right, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm excited to see that too.
To be honest, probably wouldn't be on my radar as much as it is, had it not been for the well-covered story behind it, in which at the 12th hour, not even the 11th, the 12th hour, Ridley Scott's reshot significant chunks of the film with a completely different actor, replaced Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer.
Yeah.
Was it going to be like, I don't know. I
think the trailer looks good. I like the premise. I like the story. It looks interesting. Ridley Scott operates for me largely in this 6 and 7 out of 10 kind of range. You know what I mean? I don't think he's ever made a bad film, but it's been a while since he made a really great one as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the last great one. Yeah,
probably Gladiator.
Well, for me it's great, but for other people I know it's definitely not.
Yeah, but that's the case for everything, isn't it?
It's true.
Okay, we're gonna have
one more. And again, it's kind of a perverse choice because it's Woody Allen's Wonder Wheel.
Really?
Yeah. And
what's appealing about that to you?
I know Nick Pinkerton's a fan of it. Okay. And it's appealing to me because so it's got Justin Timberlake. I'd like to see what he's going to be like in a Woody Allen film. Worst case scenario, he can't be any worse than Jesse Eisenberg. But no, I really want to see that. I don't know if it's being touted as Allen's comeback film, as every release is now touted.
Every year, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It's his best film since the last one. Okay, I'm gonna cheat though, because that's my 10 listed, but I also want to include an 11th, which is a film I've already seen, but it's a recommendation for everyone to catch on to next year. Is The Nothing Factory by Pedro Pino, a 3-hour Portuguese film about workers in Portugal taking over a factory.
Is this being released?
It's being released. It's confirmed. It'll be a very limited release, I imagine, limited to London, probably the ICA. But it's coming out at the end of January, and I saw it. Where did I see it? Oh, I saw it as part of. I was on a jury of critics, let's say, that were shortlisting candidates for the European Film Awards Best Debut feature, and this was the only film that we watched that we all agreed should be shortlisted. And at the 11th hour, we realised that it wasn't even eligible because the guy had made a contentiously 60-minute The guy had made a film previously of such a contentiously long duration that this was like inappropriate as a first feature. So,
right, okay. So that's your list. I'll give you my remaining 5 here. Okay. All right. So the next one up is Mandy, directed by Panos Cosmatos, the son of George P. Cosmatos, who we're going to be talking about at length fairly shortly. This is only his second film. His first film was Beyond the Black Rainbow in 2010, which premiered in 2010 and was released, made available, more generally in 2012. It took a while. Which is another one of those films like The Eyes of My Mother, like The Witch, where it's just like a fully formed filmmaker, like a real announcement of a new major talent. And it's a shame that it's taken so long to get this other one off the ground. But I'll read the summary here on Letterboxd, which is I believe the official summary. Pacific Northwest, 1983 AD. Outsiders Red Miller and Mandy Bloom lead a loving and peaceful existence. When their pine-scented haven is savagely destroyed by a cult led by the sadistic Jeremiah Sand, Red is catapulted into a phantasmagoric journey filled with bloody vengeance and laced with fire.
Oh, wow.
I want to watch that right now.
Yeah.
Stars Nicolas Cage. I mean, like, the use of the word phantasmagoric in that, like, the Beyond the Black Rainbow is like a really weird, like, again, 80s set, science fiction, it's 80s set, but it has the feel of a lot of like 70s science fiction. Yeah, I mean, like, I would recommend it. Sorry, I said I compared it to The Eyes of My Mother and The Witch. I don't think the film is quite on the level of those, but it's I've very, very, very high hopes for Mandy. Okay, all right, next one is Piercing, the second film by Nicolas Pesce.
Okay.
A man kisses his wife and baby goodbye, seemingly headed away on business, with a plan to check into a hotel, call an escort service, and kill an unsuspecting prostitute. Okay, the prostitute in this story is played by Mia Wasikowska, and it turns into a kind of a cat and mouse thing where she turns the tables on him. I mean, again, like this is premiering at Sundance as well. Just it's adapted from a novel by Ryu Murakami. The running time listed on IMDb is 81 minutes. This is like, it's purely just on the strength of Nicolas Pesce and the premise. Sounds really good.
Have you seen any stills from it? Is it in black and white?
No, it's not black and white. It's color.
Oh, okay.
He's in interviews. He said that it's quite different from, or very different actually from The Eyes of My Mother. But his next film after this is a reboot of The Grudge. So he's definitely staying in the horror thriller range. I'm actually quite excited for that as well. I'm not a huge fan of The Grudge, but I would love to see what he does with supernatural horror. Okay. Next up is Sunset, directed by Laszlo Nemes, who directed Son of Saul, which was my number one film of 2015. Oh wait,
I didn't see it.
Sorry, which was my number one film of 2016. It was incredible. I absolutely loved it. So this one is set in Budapest in 1913. Again, this is the summary on Letterboxd. Set in Budapest in 1913, when the city was considered to be at the heart of Europe. The drama follows 20-year-old Iris Later, who arrives in the Hungarian capital after spending her younger years in an orphanage, hoping to work as a milliner in the legendary hat store that belonged to her late parents. She's suddenly confronted with her past and starts searching for answers about her family before stumbling upon dark secrets. And apparently it's a thriller. Okay, so now a thriller, like a period thriller from the director of Son of Saul. That's all I need to know.
Okay.
I would highly recommend that you check out Son of Saul, though.
I meant to. I do. I still want to.
All right, I got two more here. I said that I would bring this up later when I was talking about Halloween, the remake of Suspiria. Okay, that David Gordon Green worked on for, I think, like 7 or 8 years for, I guess it was probably for Dimension, the genre division of the Weinstein Company. And Harvey Weinstein kept putting him through rewrite after rewrite after rewrite until he eventually just said, okay, look, you can't crack this story. It's never going to be appealing to American audiences. So he relinquished the rights. They were picked up by an independent production company. And now the remake has been directed by this year's critical darling, Luca Guadagnino, of Call Me By Your Name. So just like in the original, this is about a ballet dancer who, enrolls in a dance academy, only to discover that it's the front for something far more sinister. And I'm assuming that they're going the same direction with regards to it being, a witch's coven. But, apparently this is not going to look like the Argento film. It's going to be a complete reimagining of it. It's going to be shot very differently, scored very differently. This is the one film on the list where this was on my list before I saw Call Me By Your Name, and having not seen any previous films by Guadagnino. But I'm just ready for there's a lot of people decrying this because obviously Suspiria is like this, canonical classic, and
but it's never going to be overshadowed by another film.
No, but it's being denounced like, another Hollywood remake. This is not a Hollywood film. This is an independent European production with a a really good director.
Yeah, Guadagnino is very capable of hysteria, let's say.
Right. Okay. So I'm dying to see this. You got Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton, Chloe Grace Moretz, Mia Goth. It's a great cast. Okay. And my last one is the other film that was on my 2017 list that didn't make it out in time is Lynn Ramsey's new film, You Were Never Really Here.
Okay, so this wasn't been on my list, but I didn't want to. I knew it was going to be on yours. So.
Okay, so this just sounds fantastic. A missing teenage girl, a brutal and tormented enforcer on a rescue mission, corrupt power and vengeance unleash a storm of violence that may lead to his awakening.
Yep, sounds great. Although
85 minutes.
Wasn't that big a fan of We Need to Talk About Kevin.
I liked We Need to Talk About Kevin. I was really disappointed when Jane Got a Gun fell apart because although I'd very much be on board for a Lynn Ramsey Western, it was more the second film that was part of that 2-picture deal with that production company. It was a film called Mobius, which was a reimagining of Moby Dick in space. Yeah. Okay, directed by Lynn Ramsey. I was very disappointed when that project disappeared. Maybe they'll get Gavin O'Connor to direct it. No, but this sounds great. Like Joaquin Phoenix as a, it just sounds so up my alley. Can't wait to see it.
I could watch Phoenix in anything, honestly.
Yeah.
And Ramsey is more than capable of making a great film.
This is as far as subject matter goes, this is the most appealing that any of her films have ever sounded to me.
Yeah, I agree. I've got one more. Can I have one more, please?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The reason it's not on my list, and I forgot about it, is because, it hasn't been confirmed, whether it's complete or not. I believe it's in post-production, but it would be Alone, the new John Hyams film. Which, the premise of which reads on IMDb, a recently widowed traveller is kidnapped by a cold-blooded killer only to escape into the wilderness where she is forced to battle against the elements as her pursuer closes in on her.
Yeah, sounds cool.
I loved Hyams, what he did with the Universal Soldier films.
I still haven't seen them.
Oh, man, they are so great.
Really?
Honestly,
why do you think they have such low ratings on all the aggregators?
I have no idea. I don't know if it's the disdain with which professional critics treat them, but
I don't know.
They're so great, honestly. Properly, mint.
John Hyams was supposed to direct a remake of Maniac Cop for Nicholas Winding Refn's production company. That I was really excited for that. I was like, okay, I haven't seen any of Hyams' films, but he's exactly the type of director who I would want on that kind of project, overseen by Nicholas Winding Refn, and William Lustig was supposed to be involved in it from the original, but apparently it's fallen apart. Apparently there are some sort of behind the scenes clashes between Lustig and Refn, and the movie's apparently not happening now. So I Okay, all right, fine. Okay, I want to just very quickly just do one thing here. I'm just going to very quickly run through all of like the tentpole attractions that are coming out this year, and you tell me in a couple of words your feelings about these. Okay, so
okay.
Let's see. Black Panther.
Saw the trailer. We'll see.
Okay. The new Cloverfield movie that's may or may not be called God Particle.
I think it should be called God Particle. It's a great title. Don't know anything about it, but we'll see.
Okay. Tomb Raider starring Alicia Vikander.
Very little appeal to me.
Okay.
I mean, like, I remember the games. I remember jumping out of my skin when snakes would jump out of the screen from the grass.
Or the Tyrannosaurus. Remember when you walk into the clearing and the music just dies away? Yeah, that's one of the more memorable 90s game moments for me. Pacific Rim Uprising.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for it. Like, why
even people who liked the original are complaining about the trailer, looking like Power Rangers or something.
It's very Power Rangers-y. Yeah. It's very Power Rangers, very Transformers-y. Like, the robots that they control, as my pal said when I went to see the Star Wars film with him, Last Jedi, he said, why have they like to sexualize the robots? Like, gendered the robots? You know, they don't need to do that. It's like, nah, not for me.
No, I'm not that pushed about it either. What about A Wrinkle in Time?
What's that?
Sort of fantasy family film directed by Ava DuVernay for Disney. It's based on a popular kids book. Yeah. I saw the trailer. It looks a bit kind of like Oz the Great and Powerful, Alice in Wonderland to me a little bit. I don't like the look of it too much. What about Spielberg's Ready Player One?
I'm looking forward more to the post.
Right. I think the premise for Ready Player One sounds terrible. Like,
yeah, it's just
a load of like recycled 80s pop culture. It just sounds abysmal to me.
Nostalgia.
I do want to find out about his long legs though in the poster.
apparently they are anatomically correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Like optical illusion.
Yeah.
Okay. X-Men: The New Mutants, where they're doing a horror film about it sounds almost like Dream Warriors, where they're mutants who are institutionalized and like trying to control their powers and bending reality and all this kind of stuff.
Is this part of the prequels?
It's just part of like what Fox are doing to kind of expand the X-Men brand, like what they did with Logan and Deadpool. So this is a different kind of thing they're doing. They did a Western or a noir with Logan, so they're doing a kind of a horror film with the New Mutants.
Okay, well,
I'm pretty curious about it.
Pretty good, yeah. But I just feel like my excitement for these, and the same thing for Black Panther, is dependent on my having seen the others.
Right.
Like, that's a lot of catching up to do next year that I have.
I doubt there's a huge amount of continuity, and in this one I'd say it's relatively standalone. Fox are pretty lax about continuity anyway. Okay, what about Dwayne Johnson in Rampage?
No.
Did you play that
for 2 words? But
did you play that game in the?
No, I didn't. No,
I used to play it all the time. What about Avengers: Infinity War?
Yeah, again. So 2018 is going to be the end, which I catch up with all of
that's
the
when you definitely
Avengers movies. Yeah. I'm gonna do it. I started with Iron Man and Hulk, and I'm gonna make my way through. Okay. Should be doable.
Oh yeah, sure. You'll get hooked.
Should be doable. I say that as if it's like I'm going to war or something. Nothing's impossible.
What about Solo, a Star Wars story? Directed by Phil Lord and directed by Ron Howard.
Nicely done. Who's Solo again?
Han Solo.
Yeah, but who plays him?
Alden Ehrenreich.
That's right. I mean, I prefer to watch the Lord Miller one. I mean, I'll see it, of course. Yeah. I hope to stay clear, as you said, the last episode of the whole Jedi stuff.
Just keep it on in the kind of like the criminal underworld sort of milieu. Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you can't avoid like the Empire because they're basically the state, and they're going to run across the police who are going to be stormtroopers. Okay, fine. You're going to see like how he meets Chewbacca, and like you're going to see him do the Kessel Run and all this kind of stuff. I'm not excited for it. Deadpool 2?
Nah. I didn't see the first one.
What about Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom? Did you like Jurassic World?
It's been ridiculed, hasn't it? Like in advance. I didn't enjoy Jurassic World.
I didn't like Jurassic World at all either.
It had like a weird, cynical nastiness to it that stripped what for me is very fun from Jurassic Park. I don't know.
It's soulless. I didn't like it at all. Couldn't believe that people preferred it to The Lost World. Like that's like people who prefer that to The Lost World, you need to go back and watch The Lost World again. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Ocean's 8?
So I saw the trailer for it. I must say no.
No, I haven't actually watched the trailer.
Not excited for it at all.
On board for it. It's a good cast, you know, but yeah. Ant-Man and the Wasp.
What's Ant-Man and the Wasp?
Ant-Man 2.
I haven't seen Ant-Man.
Probably falls into your you'll catch up. You'll get excited for that one.
Okay.
What about Sicario 2 Soldado?
Yeah, I really want to see it. I mean,
however, there's no Denis Villeneuve attached to it, so that's an issue, isn't it? Because it's really him that I would like credit for the excellence of that movie. You know, because I mean the material could very very easily fall into a kind of like, you know, by the numbers cartel plot. You know,
it could, and it doesn't really like. But the reason I'm intrigued is because the first story doesn't naturally lend itself to a sequel. Like, of course, yeah, the character, like, that you could just have him, like, go from one film to the next, and sure, but, like, you know, it's an unusual film to make. And so, yeah, I'm intrigued by it.
Okay. What about Incredibles 2? Fan of The Incredibles?
Incredibles 2 coming out. I loved The Incredibles when it came out. That and Collateral were, like, the best films of 2004. Really? Alongside Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a few others, but, like, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, excited for that?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Cool, okay.
Incredibly excited.
Yeah, you sounded. Dwayne Johnson's Skyscraper.
In which one he plays a skyscraper?
Former FBI hostage rescue team leader and US war veteran Will Ford, who now assesses security for skyscrapers, is on assignment in China when he finds the tallest, safest building in the world suddenly ablaze, and he's being framed for it. On the run, he has to save his family still in the building. Now, if he's on the run, how's he going to save his family still in the building? That's what I want to find out.
Maybe it'll be like a Broad and Cell Block 99 thing.
Yeah, where he just has to make his way to the top of the building. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just one of these things where they're kind of, you know, hoping that it can open on the strength of his name, I guess.
Yeah.
Couldn't have a more generic name or poster. Yeah. What about Alita, Battle Angel, the film that James Cameron palmed off to Robert Rodriguez to direct because he's going to direct all these Avatar sequels?
Man, I just don't keep on top of, like, what is it? Explain it to me.
It's like an anime adaptation. It's about a scientist who finds a robot in a scrap heap and rebuilds her and turns her into kind of like a, you know, look impressed. No. Okay, all right. Moving on to Mission Impossible 6.
Yeah, big fan of the Mission Impossible series.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, I like them.
Is this got everyone intact?
Yeah, everybody's back. Yeah,
Jeremy Renner,
Christopher McQuarrie. I don't know if Jeremy Renner.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I'm excited because I'd be pretty confident like that they have maintained a relatively like, you know, consistent level of quality over the years. What about Shane Black's The Predator?
What is it?
It's a sequel to Predator.
It is. It's just
yeah. So like,
okay.
It is called The Predator, yeah, but it's a sequel set, you know, however many years later. Shane Black and Fred Decker, who, you know, like was one of his early, like they were Black and Decker together. They had that like production imprint or whatever.
As long as it don't go like knowingly postmodern with references to the first, because Shane Black's very much in that vein, isn't he?
He can be, yeah. He's never really. That is true. Yeah, that's true. He's never done something like this, like resurrected an old piece of material like this. But I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah. Who's in it?
Boyd Holbrook, Olivia Munn, Jacob Tremblay, Trevante Rhodes, Keegan Michael Key, Thomas Jane, Jake Busey. You know, so okay. Kind of a lot of B-listers there.
Yeah, it could work. That could work to its advantage, actually.
The Meg. Do you remember on the old message boards me being really excited for Meg, the giant shark movie that was at that time going to be directed by Jan de Bont?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's finally happening. The dream is finally coming true.
Wow.
This time it was almost directed by Eli Roth. Eli Roth came on board as director and pitched them something that they weren't too happy about. I presume he wanted to make it like very gory, very R-rated. Anyway, it's being directed by John Turteltaub, who directed like the National Treasure movies. A deep-sea submersible pilot revisits his past fears in the Mariana Trench and accidentally unleashes the 70-foot ancestor of the great white shark, believed to be extinct. Played by Jason Statham. It's a giant shark movie. Like, come on.
Sorry, what? Jason Statham plays the shark?
Jason Statham plays the
guy who...
Oh, sorry, no, maybe he doesn't play the submersible pilot, but he plays a scientist who's like the expert in... It's a giant shark movie.
I mean, like, but like...
Done properly, it's not like a Sci-Fi Channel thing.
Statham's appeal is that he's an actor. Like, an underrated one who can interact with humans. Like, I don't want to see him, like, fighting a shark.
I do. I've been literally looking forward to this film for like 10 years.
Fair enough.
Venom, the Spider-Man spin-off, starring Tom Hardy as Venom.
I loved Venom. I still haven't seen a Spider-Man movie that Raimi did with Venom in.
Yeah, not great. Raimi didn't like Venom. He was forced to put him into that film by Sony.
Right. I was always a fan of Venom as a character.
This one is R-rated. It's Sony trying what Fox did with Logan, which was always the question of like, okay, well, there are Venom comics where Venom is kind of like an anti-hero who fights people who are even worse than him. So like Carnage. And Carnage is like a serial killer or something like that, so you could do something quite...
It's the only way it could work, right? Like...
Yeah, I mean, because you have to make it distinct. It can't just be like Spider-Man, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. It's interesting, and Tom Hardy is a great actor, so... it's being directed by Ruben Fleischer, who's did like Gangster Squad and Zombieland and stuff, so I don't know. Yeah.
Gangster Squad, man, though.
Yeah, Gangster Squad was pretty bad. Zombieland was okay, but yeah.
Sean Penn's face in Gangster Squad.
What about The Girl in the Spider's Web, the reboot of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Yeah, that has very little appeal to me, that like franchise. That
yeah, me too. However, Fede Alvarez directed Don't Breathe, which I loved. So
who's playing the girl?
Claire Foy from, I think she's in like The Crown or one of those TV series. Okay. Then there's a new X-Men film, Dark Phoenix. I won't trouble you with that one. Wreck-It Ralph 2. Did you see Wreck-It Ralph?
I liked Wreck-It Ralph. I liked it. I felt the ending was conservative.
I thought it was disappointing that they halfway through they settled and stayed in one video game land, and the rest played out like a kind of Mario Kart with like a candy colored kind of like Candyland kind of reskin. I thought it was a wasted opportunity. You would think that the natural climax of that kind of movie would be like going through loads of video games, like a chase through them all or something like that.
Yeah. I felt like his character arc was conservative, but I can't really remember why I thought that.
What about Peter Jackson's Mortal Engines? He's producing that one. It's a post-apocalyptic film about cities that are on like wheels, and they move around, and the cities are like do battle with each other.
So it's like Lord of the Rings then?
Yeah, but with giant cities moving around.
Oh, cities as opposed to giant farms.
Were there giant farms moving around?
I don't know.
Okay, and then there's an animated Spider-Man film coming out that Phil Lord and Chris Miller wrote and produced, which is a lot of people are excited about that because it's the first big screen appearance of the other Spider-Man, the Miles Morales, who's like a Black Hispanic character.
Okay.
What about Aquaman? Did Justice League fill you with
Justice League episode? No. I mean, is that a trick question?
No. I think James Wan is a talented director, though, so I'd be interested to see what he does with it. Okay, two more. The long belated sequel, Mary Poppins Returns.
Does Mary Poppins die?
In the original. This is set.
I'll go see it if she dies.
This is set in the Depression, I think. The original is set around the turn of the century, right?
I hate Mary Poppins.
Do you?
Yeah, no.
The character of the film?
Just everything about it. No, I'm being facetious. Like aggressively facetious. No, I don't. It doesn't really appeal to me, to be honest.
Okay, and last one. Actually, no, there are two more. Bohemian Rhapsody. In the news of late. I
was going to say, like, did Christopher Plummer direct it?
No, I mean, it has very little appeal to me anyway, even if, whatever.
All right, and last one is Paramount's last-ditch effort to save the flailing Transformers series with an 80s set Bumblebee spin-off starring Haley Steinfeld that's been compared to E.T.
But the thing is with Transformers is that I don't know anything about them. Like, I was never into them as a kid. I've never seen any of the previous movies.
Well, then you and Michael Bay are in the same boat. One got on the wrong side of diehard Transformers fans, like, around the time that he signed on to do the first one, where he's like, yeah, I don't know anything about them.
What a lovely note to head into the new year with.
Alright, so that's the end of our year in review episode. Thank you for listening, and thank you for following us thus far, as we move into 2018.
Yeah, guys, thanks for listening.
My name is Bobby Lowe, and as always, I'm here with
Michael Pattison.
And thanks for listening, and Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2018.
Happy New Year, cheers.